so strong, the energy so deep. In this trance, we're free to leave. 1 minute flies by, yes, gone in a blink, but it's enough time to make you stop and think. 24 little frames ticking on the clock. In 60 short seconds, it's a minute we can't stop. A minute is all it takes to change our life, to find your voice, to make your stride. So let it slip by, don't let it pass you by. It's just 60 seconds, touch the sky. Lost in the depths of a melodic trance, the rhythms and beats make my heart dance. Bassline pulsing through my veins, feeling alive, breaking free from the chains. It lifts you for a state, I find my love. Music guides me, taking me high above the beats and melodies, staying strong. In this rhythm, feel the world. Life is
And in those cities, we've had now a decade plus of decriminalization, deprosecution, decarceration, and the impacts of this are obvious. We also, at least in San Francisco, we have subsidies for people who want to live on the streets and do drugs all day. I mean, it's not prohibited to do
Hope you're doing
that. So
well.
all of our public spaces have been taken over by people who are happy to take
Shut up,
whatever it
beauty.
is, $700 or $800 subsidy and do drugs all day. You also had this referendum in California that essentially lowered a whole bunch
Can't
of
get a game.
felonies to misdemeanors. Basically, if you steal less than
Struggle is real.
$950, that's considered a misdemeanor now instead of a felony. And so there's been a huge increase in crime because of that. You know, shoplifting just doesn't get prosecuted anymore, and misdemeanors don't get prosecuted anymore. We've had all these SORS DAs who don't want to prosecute misdemeanors. So I think if voters had understood that lowering a lot of these crimes from felonies to misdemeanors meant that they wouldn't get prosecuted at all, I don't think they would have done it. But that's kind of where we are.
But are we seeing a rebound from that now, Sachs? Is democracy working? Because I know that in San Francisco, we had an election recently, and in the ballots,
Come
it seemed to
on, where's
indicate
the
that voters
games?
were sick and fed up with the living situation in the city, and they're putting different people in office and have an intention of changing the city charter and changing the laws in the city so that we can reverse this trend. Is that not where things are? I mean, like sitting where you sit, like, don't you see San Francisco kind of trying to right itself? And as a result, doesn't democracy work over time?
Yeah,
here?
it's just that we live in a one-party state, and that one party has been captured by ideologues, and so it's very hard to change. It is true that in San Francisco, there was an election
another
recently,
server.
and the more radical supervisors were defeated. We have, I think, finally a good
NA
DA
for
in
life.
San Francisco. But these radicals have had a long time to entrench their power, and the party machinery helps keep them entrenched. So
Yeah.
I think you can argue that we've bottomed out because the public has recognized the problem, but it's still very hard to fix, and it's going to take a while.
I think for the first time in a long time, I'm more optimistic than not, given the people I've seen that tolerated the conditions historically have reversed course over the last year and have said, we got to act and we got to, do our kind of civic process.
Well, time will tell. You have to remember, like when New York City was a chaotic mess in the 70s and 80s, it took two different mayors and it took almost a decade for that to get cleaned up. But it took the strength of leadership. First, David Dinkins set the framework, and then Giuliani really executed, Rudy Giuliani. And between the two of them, and I think what people call the broken
the
windows
longest
theory,
queue.
they hired a lot more policemen, and they just really cleaned up all of these really
I've ever
bad
had.
areas. And then it had this knock-on effect. The problem is, when I'm staying at a hotel in Paris, or when I was speaking to some of my friends who live in London, it's the same thing. It's like the amount of knife crime is so egregious, as an example, that they tell you, don't wear a watch, etc. I mean, I don't wear watches anymore when I go out. But what's crazy is they will tell you that you'll get stabbed over a phone, where it's like, you don't need to stab me for my iPhone. Here, just take the iPhone. So there's a level of lawlessness and petty crime that's affecting tourists that to me was like very surprising. And so even when I was walking around Paris, I was like, should I really feel scared here? And my reaction was, no, I've never felt scared in Paris. But then what's ringing in the back of my ears are these warnings from people that have lived there for 10 and 20 years who've had this stuff happen to them. That was really surprising to me. So that stuff in San Francisco, as far as I can tell, or any major city in the West, hasn't really been fixed because you haven't had a shift in leadership yet where they've really said, okay, we're going to double down on policemen and policing, and we're going to amp up the punishment. That hasn't happened yet.
Well, I was just in Vegas this week. It doesn't feel.
How was your trip? Give us the trip report.
Yeah, I went to the Google Next conference, but I will say, first off, like, no crime in Vegas. Like, Vegas is Vegas. It's a very different environment. But I went to the Google Next conference. I ended up going out because at Ohalo we did a partnership with GCP, so we're moving all of our infrastructure and doing a lot of model development on GCP. And it was great. I think there was 30,000 people at this event, which was insane. Have you guys been to any of these, like AWS reInvent or the Google Next or any of these?
No, I have not.
What I didn't realize prior to going to this was how much of an ecosystem there is. Like, you go, they take over the whole convention center at Mandalay Bay, and there's hundreds of companies that have built services or build services on GCP that are there, pitching CIOs and CTOs of other companies. And so it's this real network effect type of business model that I hadn't fully appreciated, just how like deep the network is and how entrenched it is. I also got to go to this thing where I spent a lot of time with CIOs and CTOs at other companies, big companies. And a big takeaway for me that I also didn't realize was how most of them are not on a single cloud provider. Almost everyone I spoke with is on multiple clouds. So they're all on like AWS and Azure and GCP, and they use different aspects of each cloud. And there's a lot of interoperability between the clouds now.
Thanks for the follow,
which I had previously, my naive concept of this, because I'm obviously not deeply in the space, was that a company picks a cloud and they move everything over to that one service provider. But it turns out that they split. And then they allocate dollars based on the services and the pricing. So it was pretty clear that everyone it's like a race to the bottom on pricing for basic commoditizing services in the cloud, like data storage, right? And then whoever has the better, higher level services, whoever has access to better models, has the lowest price on running models, or on running things like inference, that's where the money is made. And the gross margin on that is quite different. And I think that's where a company like Google,
I don't know, we'll see.
Probably has a much bigger advantage because of the uniqueness and the quality of the models that they've developed. But yeah, I didn't really appreciate like how much there was.
Well,
so my other big takeaway was the cloud is a wide open competitive market right now. Like, there is no AWS lock-in in this market. There's no Azure lock-in. There's no GCP lock-in like these guys. Yeah.
The lock-in comes from the developer services that they provide. So both Amazon and Google, and I'm assuming Azure as well, will give you access to incredibly talented engineers who will help you build production code.
Yeah, and the ecosystem of how much. So like a lot of the clouds are competing for the consultants who actually do the work for the big enterprises. So Capgemini, Deloitte, PwC, they have these massive booths and facilities, and then go and build tools for companies is also a key part of the business strategy. And yeah, I mean, it's such a competitive market. I did not appreciate just like how much of an open game this still was.
Sure.
So
it was a great couple days in Vegas, and I got to see some of our friends. We ducked in and saw Helmuth in the Poker Go studio for a minute.
Under attack.
The tournaments going on at the Aria. It was fun. We had a good time. Okay, let's move on. So, you know, on the docket today, we were going to talk about CPI. The March CPI numbers came in from the Bureau of Labor Statistics yesterday, higher than forecast at 3.5% year over year. This is up from 3.2% year over year inflation reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics in February, higher than expected for 3 straight months now. Let's pull up this chart next. As we all know, the Fed did 11 rate hikes in 2022 and 23. And the intention was that we would see inflation come down to their target of 2% and they would start to lower rates. And obviously, we're not seeing that. Inflation is remaining hot. things are getting more and more expensive. I pulled together some of the numbers on year-over-year price increase. Housing is up 5.7% year-over-year. Transportation costs are up 10.7% year-over-year. And the highest, car insurance, is up 22.2% year-over-year.
Yeah, my car insurance is
So,
crazy.
The expectation has
House
been
insurance.
that the market will do rate cuts. Larry Summers came out and said you have to take seriously the possibility that the next rate move will be upwards rather than downwards. I guess,
That's nice.
Sachs, let me ask you first for your commentary on how this plays into the election cycle. I know Biden was expecting a rate cut or several rate cuts going into the election, which usually helps the case of the incumbent. Maybe you can comment on where the election cycle might be influenced by this inflation report.
Well, I think it's definitely bad news for Biden. I was expecting a Fed put this year, and really the whole market was. The market was expecting 3 rate cuts this year, which would have been really good news for Biden. And I think this latest inflation rate is kind of a dagger to the heart of that expectation. And I think the Wall Street Journal put it best. It said here, Wednesday's report had been hotly anticipated because Fed leaders had been willing to play down stronger than anticipated inflation readings in January and February, as reflecting potential seasonal quirks. But a third straight month of above expectations inflation data erodes that story and could lead Fed officials to postpone anticipated rate cuts until July or later. So it's not just the fact that this inflation print was higher than expected, it was also higher than
So against this, we
expected in
wanna
January
keep
and
building
February, but people were willing to kind of overlook that, saying, well, maybe it was just kind of a quirky reading. But now we've had 3 straight months. It's pretty clear that the narrative that we had going into this year, which was that inflation was on its way down, that it peaked at 9% as the official rate, I think, in 2022, and then was going down every month through all of 2023. And I think the expectation going into 24 was it would keep going down. And well, after 3 straight months of inflation, more persistent, stickier than people expected, I think the narrative facing the year now is that's going to be rates are going to be higher longer. Larry Summers is like are going to be, at the current rates for longer. He's saying they might actually increase, and that's a risk.
Yeah, last summer he said, and this was last summer, so almost a year ago, he was saying the market's going to totally wrong. We're actually going to be much higher rates than the market. The market is anticipating the market wrong. It looks at the same thing. Once again, Larry is putting himself in the impression and understanding where things are headed.
Larry Summers has, for the most part, been spot on this whole inflation question went all the way back to 2021. In Q1 2021, Biden's first vote in office, the big push was for the $2 trillion COVID relief bill, which is the so-called American Rescue Plan. And Larry Summers said that it risked inflation. It was an inflationary bill.
Oh,
Yeah, we didn't need it. The economy was already coming back, and we didn't need it. And Biden was risking inflation, but of course, inflation was only at 2% at that point. So the administration kind of poo-pooed Larry and said, "This is Larry Summers being Larry or whatever." And sure enough, we were at 5% inflation by that summer. And you have to wonder if Biden had listened to that advice, would he be in a different position right now going into the election? I think probably he would have been. And you got to wonder for what? I mean, what did that $2 trillion accomplish? COVID was winding down. These were the last bit of stimulus checks and payments to these pharma companies. And I mean, it was basically a grab bag, and it was passed on straight party lines, and it was just totally unnecessary. I mean, the economy certainly didn't need it. And so here we are. And I think that a lot of people, including the markets, thought that Biden is kind of out of the woods. That this year we see the inflation way back to normal, but that's not going to happen. And I think, going beyond the political ramifications, I think there could be several other knock-on effects that we should talk about. I mean, one is for the consumer. This means that the cost of borrowing is going to be higher for longer. That makes it harder to buy a house. Mortgage payments are higher. That also means if there's fewer home sale transactions, that means the price of housing could come down. So there could be a correction in that market. Second, if you want to buy a car, your car payment's higher. And if you have loans, your personal interest is going to be higher. And this is why I think consumers feel like they're worse off than the economic data would otherwise reflect. And Larry Summers actually had a tweet storm about this about a month ago, where he calculated that if you included the cost of borrowing, inflation, that inflation was much higher than people thought, and that it actually peaked not at 9%, but at 18%. So Larry had an excellent tweet storm on that, and he said that the cost of borrowing, which used to be calculated in inflation, but is not anymore, was why the consumer sentiment about the economy was depressed. He said that that accounted for about 70% of it. So people should be feeling better off because GDP growth is good and unemployment is low, but they're not because inflation is so high. And if you include cost of borrowing, inflation is higher. So I think this is really bad news for Biden. But it's a story that's been going on now for a year. It's not just
Prime Minister Kishida that he's sticking with his prediction of a rate cut before year's end.
Robo
but there might
builds
be a
would have been
delay,
really good there.
which I think is obviously, based on what the data is showing and what folks that seem to know and have been pretty good predictors are saying is unlikely.
we were supposed to get one in April,
Yeah.
and we were supposed to get one in June.
Oh yeah, remember
And-
the Fed Open Market Committee in December stated that they expected 3 rate cuts this year. And I think the market in some cases were predicting as high as 4 or 5.
Right.
And now
I
we
didn't
may
think
not
we'd
have
an
any, and
issue
we may
holding it
actually
with 2
see a rate hike
batteries, but
if you were to
Right.
follow summer.
Well, if we see a rate hike before the election,
wrong.
I think Biden is toast.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think Summers gave that maybe a 15 to 20% chance, which is
I just don't
still
think we
not the
microed
most
very
likely
well.
scenario. But
It's possible.
it's
I mean, Chamath,
possible,
if
and
you're-
no one was counting
yeah.
on that in December.
Chamath, if you're a Fed governor, and obviously the Federal Reserve Board of Governors sets the rates, they meet and they make these decisions. How influenced are they politically? How influenced are they by this election
Honestly,
cycle?
that should have been
historically, this is
pretty
meant
easy
to be a
hold,
fairly
I think.
independent board, but there's been a lot of consternation over the last few years that this board acts like almost a political apparatus, particularly in election years.
You mean when they're not plagiarizing?
Go ahead. Well, tell us what you're talking about.
It turns out that, before I answer your question, that was
Yeah.
a joke. Nick, you can please show the tweet, but there was an article that came out that said one of the Fed governors has apparently massively plagiarized most of the work that got her to the position of being Fed governor.
Yeah.
So the same thing that happened to the president of Harvard. So TBD what happens to that Fed governor. But it seems, my observation there was just more that it's like the preferred method of defenestration now of academics and the apparatchik, right? Before, if you had right-leaning views or centrist views, you get run out of town and get fired. Now, all of those folks are using these search engines to basically figure out really quickly that you plagiarized a large quantity of your academic work and that your scholarship is a little bit more speculative, which then brings into question, why do you get the right to help set the policy of the most important economy in the world? Well, anyways, so that was that joke. But so I think that you're asking the absolute right question. I think that the Fed has become increasingly politicized. And I do think that there are actions that foreign governments take to influence the election, but I do not think it's what most people think. When I say that, most people's ideas goes to like some darkroom conspiracy theory and misinformation. And I think that's a little bit naive. I think the more obvious way in which other governments can impact the U.S. election is exactly how Sachs said, which is they know that if inflation ticks high and interest rates are up and consumers are under pressure and meaningfully displeased with the economy, they'll vote out the sitting administration. And so what can other governments do? They can do what they're doing. So, Nick, I love this explanation of three charts. What chart do you want, please? What is this? So this is a core driver of inflation, which is the price of energy. And what you see here is that since the beginning of the year, oil prices have gone up. which ultimately will
So, yeah,
translate into a higher cost of doing
robo
business, right? Running your
Play
factory,
robo-bills.
keeping the lights on, keeping your home warm, getting from point A to point B. All of these things go up, which then ultimately get reflected in prices, which is what inflation is. And so that's a very bad trend. Obviously, we had a lot of really good stuff happen through the course of last year, but it's largely reversed itself. So it's important to double click into this and figure out, well, who's driving this? Is it just a random act, or is it a systemic set of decisions? And it turns out it's systemic. So if you go to the next chart, what this shows you is what the US has been doing. So the United States has clearly created an incentive to flood the economy with oil, which the laws of supply and demand would say prices should go down. And by bringing prices further down, they would have further brought down inflation, and they would have pulled forward these rate cuts that we had been expecting from the Fed. The problem is that the rest of the world actually said, no, hold on. And that's what you can see on the next chart. So for every time we were trying to increase production, all of these other countries have been cutting production. And this is the change in the OPEC plus crude
Actually,
production
great
targets of 2024.
map for,
So what you see here is for every barrel of oil the U.S. would pump out of the ground, more than that 1 barrel of oil would get actually restricted by all of these countries on this list, which is just to show you that these countries have a very specific view about how they want that energy market and that's just one market, but it's an input, a key input into inflation and rates to work.
So you're saying that the OPEC has a price per barrel price target, and they're able to manipulate production to maintain that price target. So while the U.S. is trying to lower the price per barrel, these other countries are able to have a stronger influence and balance out production to get. Yeah.
When you make these cuts like this, prices will go up because OPEC Plus is meaningfully bigger. The sum of all the parts of OPEC Plus is meaningfully bigger than just the United States on its own. And so the United States may amp up a few 100,000 barrels a day, but if OPEC cuts by a few million barrels a day, you see what you saw in that first chart, which is the price will go up, and that's largely why prices have gone up. So I think why this happens is because when they see the United States trying to manage inflation and manage global rates, right? Because U.S. rates are not just for the United States; they're the trendsetter for everything else. I think that in part there's a decision that this rate philosophy, the economic philosophy, the political philosophy, if they wanted to support that, what they would do is actually also keep prices where they were or increase production. But by reining in production, what you're essentially doing is voting against that entire apparatus, right? So OPEC and all of those countries, and those decisions are not made by one minister, let's be honest. They're made by the leaders of those countries, whose decision then gets reflected by the Minister of Petroleum or Oil in all of these countries, is a vote against Biden and the United States government and the politicization potentially of the Fed. And then the last comment is just that when you look at the reverse repo rate, which is a fundamental measure of liquidity, what you also see is liquidity very quickly getting sucked out of the system, which is also generally the system object that the Fed uses to make sure that the system is operating. So in totality, what is that there is a structural disillusionment with the current administration, and where people can make decisions in their own best interests versus the collective interests of the United States and a broader framework that the U.S. may represent are voting against it. And so this is why the idea of a persistent inflation rate is a lot more credible than it was 6 months ago. And I think, sorry, this last point, and I think it's just what Sachs says, which means that we're probably now on balance 50-50 between a hike and a cut. And I think if you don't see this thing change in the next 3 months, you're going to see 75-25 for a hike of at least 25 basis points. And I do think David's right. I don't see how the sitting administration in any government will be able to withstand the onslaught of electoral displeasure if rates are 4.5%, 5%, and 6% going into the year.
Tomas, if that is, I think everything you said makes sense. Going into this election, rates are high and or going higher. What does the Biden administration do? The fact is, they are very likely going to come up with a strategy to try and win votes that will likely involve some sort of stimulatory process, would be my guess. And that stimulatory process may look something like more student loan forgiveness, more debt forgiveness.
Well, Kamala
more
Harris did
delays
that.
on debt
She had,
forgiveness.
she had a whole speech about debt
And
forgiveness.
here's the irony. The actions that the administration is likely to take to support themselves in the election cycle are likely going to further and that's the biggest concern and worry I have, is that the set of behaviors that are coming down the pipe here over the next few months because of the inflation report that are actually
To your point, Biden just announced a new student loan forgiveness plan. Remember, the Supreme Court had validated his last one, so now he's trying again. And it would potentially give loan forgiveness to something like 30 million borrowers. So yeah, they're going to try and buy votes. But I think it's already very late in the game trying to do that. I think that's what they've been doing for the past few years. And there was the CHIPS Act, which
And the
was
BIA.
yeah, the CHIPS Act, the infrastructure bill. And if in fact inflation is persistent and sticky and not going away, and he doesn't get rate cuts, again, this may cost him the election. But look, I want to move beyond the political aspect of this and just talk about some more of these economic effects, because we talk about the impact on the consumer. There's also an impact on there's an impact on the government, an impact on the banks. For a second. We've talked about on the show how commercial real estate developers are coming on like they basically borrow huge amounts of money to buy commercial real estate, and rates were really low, and they did so at high valuations. Now there's a huge correction on that market, and they cannot pay back those loans. Well, they're working with the banks and restructuring those loans to have higher interest they can't pay now. The strategy could work if you believe that rate cuts are coming really soon, because you just need to hold on until the rate cuts are here, and then you can get refinanced at lower rates. But if rates are going to be higher longer, that strategy is not going to work. Because more and more real estate sponsors are in the town. More and more fire sales. This fire sale at $2 million. 99% reduction. This is like .com crash. No, this is like the price of the deal. I mean, I assume the equity was completely wiped out. That's going to create tremendous stress on commercial real estate and therefore on the regional banking system for all these loans. So that's not is the government's cost of borrowing. It's risen to 4.5% now. And if rates stay higher, more and more of the government debt is going to end up getting refinanced at higher rates. And the need to refinance all this debt doesn't to pressure on bond markets. And I think this is why the government's financing costs are so huge, and they continue to grow. We're adding something like $1 trillion of new debt.
7.6 trillion is getting refinanced of old debt. Of debt service expense. Not to mention the deficit, not to mention, et cetera, et
It'd be done at lower rates, those costs will swamp us. Over $1 trillion now. It's expensive for the government.
We are. Yeah, and it's going to rise to 1.6 trillion. So it's going to be 60% greater than our defense budget, just servicing the old debt.
We're basically in a classic debt spiral where we're borrowing. Our annual deficit we're at 2 trillion plus now. So we're not paying back
Well, they just get
the
blown
principal
up.
on the debt. We're not even paying back the interest on the debt. We're borrowing money
I knew it was
to pay off
I just
all the
needed
interest.
to build more.
So that's a huge problem for the federal government. And then I think the very, very long term. So what this chart showed, just zoom in on this, is the Fed funds rate basically like 75 years.
I didn't even see those.
And you can see that it peaked in the early 1980s when Volcker decided to break the back of inflation by jacking up interest rates to like 18%. And it was very painful. We had a pretty severe recession, and I think it was 81 or 82. But then the economy came roaring back by 83, and Reagan got elected in 84. In any event, that began a period of declining and low interest rates for investors. Again, starting in the mid 80s, and it continued all the way through, I mean, especially through, I think, the post GFC period, and then this COVID period where we had zero
I'll
interest
play
rates for
that
a long period
map
of time.
differently from now
And you
on.
can see the last spike we've had
I think
was
that
when
map
the
is-
Fed decided to jack up rates to 5% in response to inflation. So the fact that we've
Yeah,
got
these
this persistent
parents are
sticky
hyper-aggro,
inflation
true.
suggests that
I
this
think that
whole-
map's played
you could
better as
call
like a
it
carrier
really
map.
almost a 40-year period of declining and low interest rates
Thomas,
maybe
I could
over.
play Stargate on that
And
map
when
pretty
interest
good.
rates are going down, it creates a huge tailwind to the stock market and the bond market because the discount rate is lower, so stocks and bonds are going to be more valuable. Well, if we're in a long-term environment that's more inflationary,
I mean, there's no reason not
and
to
rates
play
have to
super
stay
aggressive
higher
as
longer,
Terran.
that's not great news for investors. It hurts the stock market and it
just
creates
smart.
in the private investing world, like VC and real estate, it creates a much higher hurdle rate. So it's
Right.
harder for private investors to justify
Well, we lost 2
fundraising. So,
games and we lost.
I think
100
it's too
MMR.
early to say that this 40-year trend is over, but I think it could be.
That's fun.
And the reason for that is just the huge pressure of government borrowing crowding out private investing, and this sort of ever-present need to keep issuing more and more debt at higher and higher rates to make it more attractive is going to create, I think, just very bad conditions for investors.
So, Chamath, let me ask you if you concur, given that today, where we're sitting as of recording right now, towards the end of market on Thursday, April 11th, the NASDAQ is sitting at an all-time high, and the NASDAQ is up 1.6% today. Following this inflation report yesterday, what's the disconnect in the market on why investors are buying equities, given that we're likely going to have persistent higher rates, and as a result, multiples should compress, particularly in growth stocks, and why the NASDAQ's kind of firing up?
I think it's important to look at what stocks are actually lifting the Nasdaq, just like what stocks are lifting the S&P 500. And we've seen this. There's a massive dispersion.
Yeah,
There's like
I
7 or
made
8
some big
companies that
errors that
matter
last
and
game.
500 odd companies.
I
that
scouted
don't
the
matter much.
factory 3 racks.
And so the reason why things go up in an environment like that is irrespective of the economy, money managers are paid
I really
to deploy
needed
money.
a portal
And
a little
I
earlier.
don't know if you guys saw
would've
this,
been
but
nice.
Nick, maybe you can find it. I linked to it
And then
in my
I
newsletter
just need to keep
last
warping
Sunday,
in units.
which was an
instead of building
article
those
about the
forges
fact
and
that
stuff.
the global amount of total
Like I
available
knew
equities
he
to
was doing
buy
an early push.
is shrinking.
Very early in the
Right.
game.
So
I knew
if you
that.
think about that, what that means is that the number of dollars is growing, right, linearly, and in some years it seems exponentially. But then so then a certain percentage of that finds its way into the equity markets. But when the equity markets continue to shrink and there's fewer and fewer things to buy, prices will still go up irrespective of the underlying justification. So I think that the thing is, you can't look at these things as a sign per se. You know, if you look at commodities as a different example.
Your
like I said,
warriors have engaged the enemy.
commodities are up, broadly speaking, 30% since the beginning of the year.
Your warriors have
There,
engaged
I think
the
the
enemy.
reality is the following. Countries are feeling increasingly uncomfortable with the decisions that the United States are making. Whether that's its position to keep funding the war in Ukraine, whether that it's the continued instability in the Middle East, whether it's posturing in China, whatever it is, every country is now making a very different calculation about what they want to do. And I think how it gets reflected is that they're optimizing for their own economies. And what that yields is each of them trying to make as much money as they can in the short term. And as a country that is a net importer, we are going to feel the price of those decisions as inflation. And I think Sachs is right. Like, that's where we have to start figuring out how we rebalance these decisions from a foreign policy and economic perspective. Because if you don't change something here, all of these countries are basically going to be like, we're on our own. We're going to optimize for self. These countries are basically voting in a way that says we are not being led in a way that we trust. And that unfortunately falls at the feet of the sitting president.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm hopeful, as we all are, that work in the tech industry, that new tools and AI and other technology would have a massive driver on productivity, which net to help spin this out as they're on waxing hope. Sitting here, AI obviously viewed as being highly disrupted by non-technologists and deeply concerning, and particularly in DC.
What is that thing that Bill Gates says? Things are overestimated in the short term and deeply underestimated in the long term. I think that's what AI is.
That's right. That's right. And so
AI is a bunch of, no offense, probabilities and statistics today. Okay? And so we talked about this last time. So we should debunk this whole thing of like there's some glowing brain somewhere that's capable of doing everything. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't underestimate it or be capable of this in 5 or 10 years, which is probably the window in which we have some form of AGI, but today it's not that. And so the great leaps in productivity, Freeberg, that you're talking about are probably a 3 to 5 year phenomenon, another 3 to 5 months. So what Sachs says is right, which is how the city administration 5 votes today,
stimulatory
they will have to make a ton of promises. The problem is it can't really work its way into the economy fast enough come the November election. And so that's where I think they're in a really tough spot, which means that then, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but this is where you have a lot of these wag the dog kind of scenarios that come to mind, because then the only way to really galvanize a populace is to distract them.
Yeah. Well, look, let's talk a little bit more about AI, because I do think that regardless of the near-term and longer-term implications, there is a peaking of fear, peaking of interest, both different spelling of the word peak. Adam Schiff yesterday proposed a bill, earlier this week, called the Generative AI Copyright Disclosure Act, in response to, I think, over 100 musicians signing a letter saying they're concerned that their copyrighted works are being used to train AI models. And Nick, if you pull up the text from the bill that I pulled out here real quick, you can take just a quick look. It's a very short bill. It's only 5 pages long. And it defines a generative AI model that's a combination of computer code and numerical values designed to use artificial intelligence to generate outputs in the form of text, images, audio, or video, and that it substantially incorporates one or more models as a system, and it's designed for use by consumers. And what the bill then asks is that anyone developing these models has to submit to a register run by the federal government a list of all of the data that they used that might be copyrighted to train the model, and that this becomes a precursor to being able to legally develop and use AI models, that you actually have to register the training data. So I have a rant on this, which I'm going to preserve for the end, given my rights as moderator here today, but I'd love the reaction from Sachs first on Schiff's proposed bill, and we'll run this one around the horn pretty quick.
Well, first of all, I think it's too soon for this legislation. I mean, the first thing that needs to happen is we need to get the question of fair use arbitrated by the courts. We've talked about this before. People publish lots of information on the internet, and I guess technically it's copyrighted, but it's been published in a completely public way. And humans are obviously allowed to read it and use it to generate their own work. I think it's a question about whether AIs are allowed to learn from it as well. And I would argue that they should be, to some degree, under fair use. Maybe if you're talking about copyrighted songs, I don't know if that's different. Anyway, these questions need to be arbitrated. And once we know that, then we'll know whether there's a need for a rights clearinghouse of some kind, which may not be a bad idea. I actually got pitched by a founder recently to create a rights marketplace with copyright holders on the one side, or rights holders, could be musicians, could be movie studios, could be anyone who owns content, and then AI companies on the other that want to license that content for training purposes. And I actually thought it was a pretty good idea. So
Mineral field depleted.
my point is just that there are entrepreneurs working on solving this problem as well. And I guess what I'm saying is I'd like to see fair use figured out, and I'd like to see what the private solutions are going to be before we try to legislate this problem away to really a point of ignorance, because we're so early in the development of this market. Now, one of the questions you have to ask here is, why did Adam Schiff introduce this bill? I mean, who is Adam Schiff? Adam Schiff is a powerful California congressman who is the candidate for U.S. Senate right now, and he's expected to win. He's ahead of Steve Garvey, who's the Republican candidate, by like 30 points. Schiff is, in addition to being a vicious partisan who's known for Russiagate, he also is a pretty big fundraiser. And when he's not in front of the cameras, he's very effective in closed doors, appealing to the key special interests in California, for that matter. And my guess is that he's not carrying water here for the 100 musicians who signed that letter. He's carrying water for the big studios, the big Hollywood studios, music labels, but also the movie studios. And
He's an LA-based congressman.
yeah, I mean, that's who he's representing. Now, at the same time, my guess is that he's run this by the big tech companies, and he's probably got their blessing to some degree, because like Bill Gurley always points out, they like rules like this because of regulatory capital. They can comply with them, but the little guy, the entrepreneur who's trying to create something new, has a much harder time complying with these regulations. So this is basically a big special interest group sort of deal that I think he's putting forward.
Do you think this becomes law?
Not yet, but it's paving the way for something.
And it's more like his promotional effort during his campaign, I think.
Well, I mean, his...
He'll still try and move it legislatively, but...
Yeah, I mean, the big powers that be like this.
Any reaction to that bill?
It turns out that OpenAI transcribed over 1 million hours of YouTube videos. My takeaway when I read this was, well, if Google's not going to sue OpenAI, then this is a moot point. Because you're talking about one of the most valuable companies in the world with one of the most valuable sources of training data in the world. And so if it's true that there was a copyright violation and Google just let it go, what chance will these group of singer-songwriters have? And, no offense to Adam Schiff, but he's not going to be able to do anything. So if this multi-trillion-dollar company doesn't draw a line in the sand, then none of this matters and everybody's going to train away.
I think, my big takeaway on all this is that there's a real deep misunderstanding on what these models really are and what they're doing. The assumption,
Upgrade
I
complete.
think, naively, is that they take in a bunch of data and then they spit that data back out. And in some cases, maybe slightly transform. But the truth is that the models don't actually hold the data that they're training. They develop a bunch of synthesized predictors that they learn what the prediction could or should be from the data. And this is similar to how humans operate. This article is from last May, and you guys may remember this. I can't remember if we talked about it on the show, but Ed Sheeran was sued by the state for an infringement of his song. the jury how he comes up, how he runs his creative process, how he came up with the song, and how he does his work. And as you know, Ed Sheeran and nearly every musician or every artist listens to other people's music,
GG.
looks at other people's art, and they synthesize that data. They synthesize that knowledge and that experience into their own creative process to output what, in their mind, is a novel creation. And I think that AI works in a similar vein in that it's not actually storing the images, it's not actually storing the music of third parties. It's learning from that process. We all, like musicians, learn on classical music. They listen to and play other pop artists' music. And then they learn things that they like, things that they don't like, things that fit together well, certain intonations, syncopations, and that's how they develop their own tracks. And so I think that the assumption in AI is that it's almost guilty until proven innocent is what's going to really challenge this technology getting mainstay appeal and being useful in the way that it could and should be. That the de facto is that it's learning and training is copyright infringement.
I don't buy that.
You don't buy that?
No,
That
let's
it
use
stores
this.
the data?
No, that just because you're learning like a human, it's not copyright infringement. And
I'm sorry, let me make my last statement, which is that I do think that similarity is measurable, and that is copyright infringement. So I would, rather than focus on how you train the model, I would encourage legislators to find, as Sachs points out, a better process to define what makes one thing distinct from another, run that analysis, and then use that analysis to determine uniqueness. And that analysis is ultimately what should determine whether there is copyright infringement versus the how was the model trained exercise, which is wrought with challenges, as you guys know. How do you determine weightings? How do you determine whether this was even relevant in the model? We don't even know if the models ignore the data or use the data in their synthesis or in their weightings. It's all very opaque. And so it's almost like, hey, here's a list of stuff that I read, but I may not have even paid attention to 95% of it when I was reading it. We don't know. And so I'd rather focus on, is there copyright infringement in the output? Does the output mimic an original copyrighted source? And if it does, then that's where the infringement should lie, not on the how did you do it.
I think that you're creating an impossible standard. Is it 5% the same? Is it 8% the same? Is that 14%? Where's your threshold? Is it 78%?
Well, how's that different than training? How's that different than training? If I'm J.K. Rowling, am I not allowed to read other authors' copyrighted books for fear that by reading it, I will now use their copyrighted material in my novel book?
No, okay, stick with that example, but we can also use the Ed Sheeran example. Nick, let me play this video.
I could play you every song in the pop charts right now over 4 chords. You name any song and I'll play it in the 4 chords. So these are the chords.
FCG and
Messenger. Your friend.
Cause you only need the light when it's burning low. Only miss the sun when it starts to snow. Only know you love her when you let her go.
Let it be.
I'm walking away, Craig David.
Craig David.
I'm walking away from the troubles in my life.
Last one. Let it be. Beatles.
When I find myself in times of trouble, wasn't that I'm telling you.
Why is that important? Obviously, it's not illegal for Ed to have learned these 4 chords, but if he tries to produce those songs and calls them something else, that's clearly somebody else's IP. Similarly, I think that if you don't give people the right to say, yeah, of course, the letters A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way to Z are not my invention. It's the alphabet. I don't control that. I don't control words and their meanings. But when I put one word in front of another purposefully, and I create something that has value to me, I should have the right to protect that. And I think that's the fundamental question. Should you not have a right to protect it? Should you allow somebody else to take that and in some opaque way, an undefinable way, make a system that could compete with that thing and have no repercussions? I think that that's what people need to decide. And I'm fine, by the way, one way or the other.
Yeah, in the Ed Sheeran case, he was saying the exact copyrighted lyrics,
warriors have
and he was
engaged the
singing the
enemy.
exact copyrighted melody. He was just playing the harmony with 4 chords. I mean, that was kind of the point he was making. And in the case of all the copyrighted material you're stating, I want to protect it from showing up in the end product of someone's creative process. I shouldn't care about them listening to my song in their creative process. Everyone always references how Oasis sounds like the Beatles, right? That those guys love the Beatles, they listen to the Beatles, so much of their music mimics and sounds like the Beatles, but the Beatles aren't going to file infringement suits against them. They were inspired by the Beatles. That was part of their creative process. And so I would argue that the output should really be where we assess this stuff, and it's going to take a lot of cases.
You're creating an impossible scheme where any individual person will have the economic wherewithal to fight this. And so it's basically ceding all creativity to the board. And I don't think
What is the standard of measuring how someone is training their creative process? Your standard is I gotta go.
I don't think this is
I gotta go listen. I gotta go. You gotta tell me every time you, as an artist, listen to a song, and then I'm gonna determine whether or not you are listening to copyright music and making your own music. That's basically what we're asking for here with this bill.
That's not. I'm not talking about the bill. I'm talking about this idea that if you train a system that can actually automate a task for you, based on some learning that's unique, you should be able to uniquely protect your own. For example, we have a different set of ways in order to protect processes that are unique to you, which is you can have a patent or you can have a trade secret. But if you strip all of this stuff away where some system can, in an automated way, do anything for you and replicate a whole bunch of work that it sits on top of to be able to do that without any repercussions, I think that that's a very important explicit decision. And what I'm saying is, you cannot expect individual people to go and fight these little battles against these big, multi-hundred billion dollar companies. If the big multi-hundred billion dollar companies and trillion-dollar companies don't fight the other multi-hundred billion dollar and trillion-dollar companies, what they're effectively saying is none of this is worth copyrights are worth nothing. And I'm okay with that decision, but it should be an explicit one. And it's not going to happen the other way where some 5-page law from a guy who's trying to get elected is not the thing that's going to make it. The difference is if Google doesn't sue OpenAI, it means copyrighted works. And by the way, that article didn't just point the finger at Google. It pointed the finger at Meta, where there were explicit decisions to say, yeah, no, let's just violate the copyright. It's okay. And if it's okay, then it's okay.
Zach, you're the independent arbiter here. Any summary?
Well, somebody's going to litigate it. Somebody's going to litigate it. You're right. It'd be surprising if Google didn't want to, given how valuable all their YouTube content is, and a competitor, slurped it up to train their model. But somebody will litigate this. It could be these songwriters. Who knows? And then we're gonna get some messy arbitration around fair use. It's probably gonna work its way up. Circuit courts will probably get different judgments, and finally some court will resolve it. And then we'll kind of know where things stand, and then there'll be a legislative fix. I don't know where it's going to end up. I mean, I know what Jake Al would say if he were here. I'm sure he's like chomping at the bit to be part of this conversation. He would say that creators deserve to get paid for their AI rights, and that if you want to make money training a model on their content, you got to compensate them. I buy your argument too, which is you're not really violating their rights for the AI model to read their content and analyze it, which is what it's really doing, as long as it doesn't output a violation of their copyright.
And that's what all artists do. That's what all humans do. The creative process is one of initially synthesis. You learn from other people's works, you learn from the environment around you, you learn from the world. There's compensation for those other things. There's not. You don't never paid the people to listen to their music. They bought the radios, that's not true. They listen on the radios, they may not have paid, but some advertisers paid for an ad. The radio station had to pay ASCAP and BMI. There was publishing rights, there was all kinds of other rights, so that's not good. What I'm saying is it's not copyright because I trained my software. It got paid, so that's the songwriter did get paid. We may not have been paid by the listener, but in this example, nobody's getting paid.
Look, I think there's three potential outcomes here, okay? Outcome number one is that Freeburg wins, and the courts decide that this is fair use, and these AI companies aren't in violation.
And copyright infringement is measured in the work of art that is produced, not in the content.
Right, okay, so that's solution number one. I think solution number two is that the courts throw a big wrench into it, or a little, like, just drill it, or throws a big wrench into it, and I think what happens then is new AI companies have a really hard time accumulating training data, and so the incumbents who already have all the training data, they may have to pay a fine, maybe some slap on the wrist, but now you've created a barrier to entry. that's going to be a big problem, I think, for the open source movement. So that's outcome number 2. And then outcome number 3 is you create some sort of rights clearinghouse, kind of like exists in the recording industry, where if you want to cover somebody's song or perform somebody else's song, there's already predefined terms on which you can use those rights, and there's the compensation mechanism for that. So you don't have to go negotiate every single deal that you want to do. You can just use the song, use the rights, and there's compensation for that. That would be like compromise. I could see that alternative number 3 existing, in which case the incumbents like that because they want there to be a better they want to make it hard for the guy in the garage to pony up the capital necessary to create a new model. But at least that would be a somewhat functional system. It wouldn't be outcome number 2, which would totally put the kibosh on the use of training data. So in any event, I don't know which one of the 3 it's going to be, but those are the 3 options I see happening.
Have you guys seen it's like a Vue music Gen AI system? It is friggin' unbelievable.
Is that Vinode's thing or Vinode's another thing?
I think Vinode's another thing. This one just came out. It was apparently rumored for a while. Ex-DeepMind employees started UDO in this kind of like hot stealth company. For a couple of months, people have been talking about it as rumored to be the best in AI. But here is someone that says, Dune, the Broadway musical. And this is what it output. Go ahead.
While Atreides of Arrakeen, the greatest leader we've ever seen, they say that he's the villain eyes bright blue and hair jet black. You should see him ride on a samurai back.
That's crazy.
You can hear the layers
Is
of
under
music,
attack.
the layers of tracks, the movement, the tempo. Obviously, like there's just so many layers to this. Nick, can you pull up another one? Some of these are incredible because it spans styles. It's like so beautiful, like the way it's put together. Every piece feels somewhat emotional and unique. It really doesn't feel like you're just listening to someone simply copying
Warriors have engaged the enemy.
funky dance pop song. Playing a birthday song for my friend Urban. Played an Irish folk tune with violin and instrumental. It's pretty incredible, and I think it shows the state of the art is such now that this is going to become a real challenging question from a legislative point of view, given how far ahead these technologies have gotten. And I think that musicians, artists, consumers are going to start to use these tools in a really prolific way, given how good they are now. I heard from someone that just sat for hours creating tracks that they listened to on Udio the other day. And so you basically just play your own music all day long. It's really incredible. Anyway, exciting time.
Hopefully all the lawsuits and the legislators don't get in the way of all this innovation because it's moving really
Upgrade
fast. And
complete.
we should just kind of see where it goes before trying to
Have engaged the enemy.
I want to talk about, this like emerging trend that we've been talking about online about drones in warfare. Recently, we saw small drones controlled by the Houthis attack cargo vessels in the Suez Canal, like large-scale supply disruption, value destruction. We've seen videos. In fact, I think you have one. Pull it up and take a look. Destroying tanks and large warehouses in Russian-held territory, causing tens of millions of dollars in damage. You're seeing the acceleration of the changing face of warfare technology, launching these small form factor, low-cost, autonomous physical agents. And I think there's a bunch of implications,
Your
both with
warriors have
respect to
engaged
war,
the
but
enemy.
also how we spend money on defense and how Silicon Valley is involved in this cause. Like some of the things you've been seeing in the utilization of these new technologies and the war that's going Go ahead.
I've heard a lot about the effect of drones just by watching the coverage of the Ukraine war. I was listening to an interview with an American person who was fighting on the side of Ukraine. He described how different Russia have them. And several months ago, going into this year, Zelensky said that this would be the big game changer for Ukraine. They're going to make 1 million drones. I don't think it's worked out that way. It turns out that as many drones as the Ukrainians have been able to put on the battlefield, the Russians have even more because they're able to mass produce them in factories. They've got bigger drones, better drones. And I think the most important variable in the war so far with respect to drones is that the Russians have pretty advanced electronic warfare. And so they've been able to jam a lot of the Ukrainian drones, whereas the reverse has not been true for the Ukrainians. So I would say that drones have been a huge factor in the war, but so far the balance there is tipping towards the Russians
Never
as
seen
it is in so many other areas as well.
Was a lot of
But
corruptors
to your larger
dying.
point, there's no question this is the future of warfare. And you're seeing that it's creating a lot of opportunities for asymmetric warfare. So, for example, with the Houthis, they've been firing cheap missiles and drones at our ships in the Red Sea, and we've been having to spend $2 million air defense missiles shooting down $2,000 drones. So if that continues and we don't have a good response to this problem, it's going to really change the balance of power.
I don't know if this was at our summit or if I heard this later from some senior person in the military who said that aircraft carriers are outdated technology, like they don't make sense anymore. And we're going to see a shift towards lots of small, autonomous, drone-like systems on the battlefield taking out targets. And as a result, if you game theory this out, the necessity for defense systems against large amounts of swarming drone-like systems. And then, you know, what do you actually have to do with your existing military architecture to play into this kind of new tactical system? And then that's going to require a massive evolution in technology. And is the United States prepared?
They should be.
Silicon Valley play a
They
role?
should be. We should. Maybe Nick, you can throw up the first link that I sent you. But 8 years ago, I came to this conclusion and I invested in this company called Saildrone, which is autonomous drones in the seas. Our customers include the U.S. Navy. The chairman of our company is Admiral Mike Mullen, who is the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But these drones are capable of going into some of the most dangerous places in the world and collecting enormous amounts of surveillance data and information that otherwise takes the United States government lots of time and lots of money and is pretty scattershot. And instead, with these things, you can be constantly in hotspots. And if you go to the next one, so much so that, you know, we've deployed some of these drones in the Middle East, and there was a point at which the Iranian Navy intercepted 2 of our drones and picked them up, and this was kind of like a global thing a few years ago. But I really believe in this trend, and I think that we have an enormous responsibility to be funding these things. These are really complicated systems to build, obviously, and they take lots of time, so these are not overnight successes, Friedberg, and they take lots of money, which is hard to come by as well. But these are absolutely the right kinds of businesses, because eventually, at a minimum, you are building systems that can measure and collect enormous amounts of really critical data so that people can make better decisions, which hopefully is measured in saving life, right? And then over time, you actually get to a military that should be much cheaper, much safer, and has fewer people in general on our side and on our enemy side on the front lines, which means fewer casualties. And I think that that's the whole value of this entire movement. It's cheaper, it's way better, it's much more useful, and it gives the respective armies that use these things, or militaries rather, a fuller picture so that you can make decisions that have enormous consequences.
Yeah, and in February, the Department of Defense, on a panel in Arlington, Virginia, briefed reporters and industry folks on their interest in growing their partnerships in Silicon Valley to access the necessary technologies that are going to rewrite the face of warfare. I don't know about you guys, but I've seen kind of 2 sides of this in Silicon Valley. A good number of venture capitalists and entrepreneurs and technologists think that it's morally incorrect to support warfare technology. And then there are a few that are going blazing ahead with supporting this new evolution in these technologies. Do you guys see the same? And is there going to be kind of this?
It's a big step to weaponize these things, right? So, Saildrone, we have a very good big, thriving, successful business. These machines aren't weaponized by any stretch of the imagination. And so I think that comment is more genuflecting and virtue signaling than it is real. Because in order to even be legitimately considered for some kind of like armed, unmanned product, you have to be deep inside of the bowels of the DoD and Pentagon and have been working with them for years to even be taken seriously. So the startups that are like pursuing those deals are not even close to those deals. And the startups that are close to them are probably being much more quiet and thoughtful and hush-hush because the path to do that isn't legitimate unless you've been in business with these folks for 10 plus years.
Yeah, I think it's more commentary on the fact that if this is where an organization, the Department of Defense, that has a $1 trillion annual budget is going to be allocating resources, that technology is going to need to come from somewhere. And the investors in Silicon Valley that are making these investments are likely going to outperform those who are not. Does that sound reasonable to you, Sachs, that there is a shift underway? Again, shine away from defense technology or necessarily going to be left out of a kind of a new industry that's emerging in Silicon Valley?
Well, I guess the way I would put it is that the U.S. government spends over $800 billion every year on defense, and it's not clear what we're getting for that money because in Ukraine, for example, we've run out of artillery shells. We've run out of Patriots. We've run out of Javelins. We've run out of Stingers. So we're spending all this money. We're not getting a lot for it. And part of the reason is because the defense industry is consolidated down to these 5 prime defense contractors who are basically an oligopoly. And we have this cost-plus procurement system where they just raise their prices every year and the government pays them. So I think all of us want the United States to have an effective defense, and I want us to use our military power more wisely. I don't like all these stupid wars we keep getting in, but I do want the United States, as an American, to be the most powerful country. I do want us to get the best value for our defense dollars. And the only way that's going to change is if the defense industry gets disrupted by a bunch of startups doing innovative things. And there's no question that future warfare, to your point about autonomy, I think that is that right now, it's completely controlled. First-person vision drone, and you basically strap drive it into targets. Those types of drones are easier to construct in warfare because the drone basically doesn't know what to do. Like the next step is systems that target. This like jamming technology or this EW like technology. So that's where the battlefield of the future is headed. And in a good way, if you think about becoming technology wars.
That's right.
Which may or may not be good. I don't know.
Of small autonomous systems that go and find a target and try and execute a mission. And, in the case of Ukraine saying they want to have 1 million, China might say, I want to have 100 million. All of these systems are dependent on lithium-ion battery systems. Today, 79% of lithium-ion battery production comes out of China. The U.S. is only 6.2% of global lithium-ion battery production.
With some force fields, and
China has talked about scaling up drone manufacturing to a level that the U.S. simply cannot even contemplate in its industrial architecture today. So it seems to me that if that is where warfare tactically is headed, that China has a huge leg up and is going to become a critical point of dependency for the United States to develop an arsenal necessary to be competitive in this kind of next evolution of warfare. I will say that, if you then game theory this out, Like, how do you defend against these autonomous electronic systems? There's a technology called EMP, or electromagnetic pulsing, where, as you guys know, you run a very high current electric field, you can actually send out and emit a pulse that then, when it hits electronic circuits far away, induces a high electric current in those circuits and short circuits them. So EMPs are a defense system that allow you to take out electronic systems. And this has been, kind of a part of warfare since probably the 1960s, 50s, but targeted EMPs and targeted systems for eliminating all of these autonomous systems becomes a new defense technology that I know several startups in Silicon Valley that have been funded with a lot of capital by folks that we all know very well that are kind of pursuing this.
We don't have a choice. Because I think the point is that if you just post this photo, we have an enormous human capital problem with the military, which is there's just not enough folks enlisting anymore. So we don't have any choice except to automate and become drone dependent.
Just tell us these numbers.
This is a chart from the Department of Defense that shows military enlistments looking back from about the 1970s through today. And these are two lines that are just going from the upper left to the lower right. And so we're at all-time lows with respect to the number of people that actually want to join the military. And so if we are supposed to, as Zach said, be this very sharp fighting force, then all of the money that we're spending needs to get allocated into things that can be remotely operated. We don't have a choice.
Yeah. I mean, so Freeberg, you asked the question, how do we defend against these drones?
Your warriors
Yes,
have engaged the
use
enemy.
EMP technology. If you want to use an EMP, you better make sure there's not any planes nearby because it will take them out of the sky. You better make sure.
By the way, there are now you can target EMPs in a narrow cone, which is part of the technology.
Yeah, I mean, you
Base
better
is
make sure you
under
don't hit
attack.
any of your own stuff because you'll fry the electronics on those unless you EMP harden them, which, by the way, will happen. I mean, if this gets really good at sending out EMP pulses, then our opponents will start EMP hardening their drones. But
Base is
anyway,
under
yes, it's a
attack.
category of defense. So is electronic warfare. The one defense investment I've made is actually in this idea of how do you defend against drones. And it's a startup where I led the seed round called Allen Control Systems, and they have a product called Bullfrog, which is a gun turret that uses a standard M240 machine gun, but it's got the scanner next to the machine gun that is searching the sky for enemy drones. And it uses computer vision to recognize them, and then it just shoots them down, like, very quickly. And it seems to me
Could be
this
CTs.
it's maybe not the only way of doing it, but it's a really good way of doing it because you could mount these things to a vehicle. I mean, imagine in the future that we have these autonomous drones everywhere that are basically assassination drones. How are you going to stop them? I mean, how do you move the president of the United States around? I mean, there's you're going to have to have, your caravan's going to have some sort of electronic warfare system on it to basically prevent drones, but it's going to need some sort of last line of defense where you can just shoot a drone out of the sky.
Or he
And that's
stays in
what-
his basement.
You don't have any moral trepidation around investing in defense technology, just to be clear.
Well, I'd have to think twice about investing in a weapon. This is more of a defense technology. This is defensive in nature, where you're trying to take out a drone that would be attacking one of our bases or installations or convoys. So this is fundamentally defensive in nature. And look, I want America to be the most powerful country. I'm an American patriotic, so I don't want our troops to be killed by enemy drones. So I have no problem with this. I do have a problem with all the stupid wars the United States gets into. But that's on a policy level. I don't feel like that's separate from the question of do we want our guys to be protected. Yes, we do.
And Jamal, you don't care. You would invest in defense technology.
Well, I care. I think that I would probably have to think twice about making weapons. I'm not sure that I'm really interested in that, but like I said, 8 years ago, my thought was we need to move to, just looking at those trends, we need to move to an entire surface area of unmanned autonomous vehicles. And I really like this idea of a class of machine that's there to surveil and collect all the important data so that people make proper decisions. And it's taken us 8 years, but we're firmly entrenched now.
I think the fact that both of you highlight a degree of trepidation, and you guys are like barely outside of the middle bounds of Silicon Valley would think and make decisions indicates like why so much of Silicon Valley has deep concerns about investing in defense technology. And the U.S., despite having the best technology, may be challenged by the fact that our Silicon Valley technologists and investors are held back on pursuing these evolutions because of a moral suasion. And I think it is something that the Department of Defense has highlighted, is that
I want to be clear, though.
Yeah.
It's never like we've been faced with that choice. And the reality is, like, if the choice is stay small or scale up and be really big, you know, it's hard to turn away from that decision. But that choice isn't a realistic one. This is why I was saying, I think it's, you can come into it with the moral framing, but I do think that Sachs is right, which is, if you believe that America should be the most important country in the world and you have the ability to help it be that, eventually some of those decisions will come in contact with this kind of decision. And usually, though, it takes many, many years before that's realistic. And to be honest, from what I've seen, the opportunity to pursue that is generally so financially remunerative that everybody's like, okay, I think we have to do it.
You know, I don't have a problem with investing in a company like Anduril. I mean, America needs defense companies in order to maintain its defense. And the problem right now that we have is there's these 5 declining companies that are antiquated and really expensive. And we need startup disruptors to that. So I'm not like morally opposed to it. In fact, I think it's probably a good thing. I think my concern would be, I don't want to be part of the military-industrial complex. I feel like it might corrupt my views on things. Like I don't want to.
No, you'd want war. You'd be girding for war.
Yeah, like I don't want to be. I don't want to feel.
Because that's your incentive. That's you know.
I don't want to feel an incentive to like these generals on CNN and Fox News to justify every single war.
That's my biggest fear as well. It's like it's one thing to be investing in a bunch of companies where we're sitting around hoping for cheaper clicks on Facebook and Google. It's an entirely other thing to sit on the board of a company and hope for growth. That's a horrible place to be.
On that point, that's a great point to wrap on, guys. This has been fun. A little more flat than it would normally be with J-Cal. We miss him. We wish him well. We hope his tooth recovers. And we will be back with your...
It's like that scene in Dune where he eats his tooth and releases that poison gas.
Get better soon, J-Cal.
Please, if you're interested in the Summit, summit.allinpodcast.co. Click subscribe on YouTube. I've been given notes to say that. For the chairman dictator, Jamal Palihapitiya, the raid man, David Sachs, I am your sultan of science, Dave Greenberg. We will see you guys next week.
Love you, boys.
I got you. Bye-bye.
We need to get merch. Besties are back.
What's up, I am Inferno.
Remember George Washington? You know how he died? Well-meaning physicians bled him to death. And this was the most important patient.
In those cities, we've had now a decade.
$400.
Yeah, I know it's not true.
You know it's not true, right?
That's what we were talking about.
I love the reaction.
I've found myself defending BlackRock a lot these days.
That's interesting. How does that make you feel?
From the nonsense.
How does that make you feel?
I like BlackRock.
To be defending BlackRock.
Well, I'll tell you, I have to defend their honor. No, it's not them. It's just misinformation that they own corporate America.
They don't need you.
No, I know. Hold on. No, it's not. But
good.
I was talking to somebody at dinner about this. I'm like, but it's our money. Like it's. But anyway.
So you believe BlackRock owns corporate America?
Well, but listen.
Yes, but they own it with our money.
It's our money.
Right.
So
Right, it's not
Yeah,
other
yeah.
money.
So wait, so here's in defense of BlackRock, it's our money. More than half the assets that BlackRock manages are for retirement.
Yeah,
We help about 35 million Americans invest for life after work. That's a quarter of the country's workers. So that's the defense of BlackRock. But here's the bullshit. In Larry Fink's recent letter, he said 4 in 10 Americans can't come. That's nonsense. But he linked to.
It's a
He
number
linked
that's
to.
Linked to irrelevant investor.
Yeah, LOL. That was my nonsense. No, it's from.
Gotcha.
It's a Federal Reserve Board publication, Economic Well-Being of U.S. Households in 2022. But the problem is it's 86 pages, so I can't find the data.
It's made up.
Wait, no, I got it.
I've seen that debunked by Ben
A
Carlson.
million times, right?
Didn't
I
Ben
think,
do
I
that?
think,
no,
I
no
think it's the
Poland
way
Spring
they
for me.
phrased the question.
Yeah,
Like,
we got
can
the
you
label.
put
We gotta get the label.
$4 in a cash emergency?
No free advertising. Nope. We gotta charge. We gotta start charging now. Listen.
You're such a
Yeah.
journalist.
Yeah.
Remaining objective.
Oh no! This is about getting the bag. It's not like they want.
Always get the bag.
They want some advertising. They're gonna have to pay.
How's my forehead? Is what it is. Tried. Here we go. I feel like Beetlejuice.
Wait, what?
You know the Whackpacker Beetlejuice?
No.
Okay.
I am not.
No?
What? When you don't have a hat on, you have headphones on your head, you don't look like Beetlejuice. So I was making my IRA contribution the other day, and this new thing that I started doing. At the same time I make the contribution, I also make a contribution at the Metropolitan Convention Center to Sam Bankman Fried's commissary. So I'm doing. So I
enjoying some
listen.
cigarettes
I don't
on
want
your
credit.
behalf.
I don't want credit. I just I want to make sure that young man has peanut butter money. You know what I mean?
What's the new thing? We had a.
He's gonna come out with more money than anybody you know.
You think?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Just
because things in crypto are bubbling again, and he didn't liquidate everything he owns. His family was rich. He never once did that family complain to the judge that they don't have the money to continue their defense or anything. They have endless money still. Endless. And by the time that bankruptcy, liquidation, proceeds, blah blah blah, that could go on for 12 years. I'm telling you, he's gonna come out ahead.
One thing I forgot to ask about is can we play the video? My bonds video?
I don't have it handy, but we definitely can.
I can send it.
Okay.
I can send it. It's
Are we
not hard to
talking
find.
bail bonds?
No, treasury bonds.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking treasury bonds.
Dion rapped over bonds.
Oh, we
I rapped about bonds. Yeah, we made a whole song and a music video.
Please share.
So speaking of prison, my wife used to.
Okay.
Confessions.
My wife used to love the show Locked Up. I think it was on the Discovery Channel or Nat Geo for years. Do you remember that show?
What did you like about it?
Everything.
Wait, the reality show?
Yeah.
It was in a Supermax prison?
Yeah, she would watch it for hours.
Did you watch Oz? Are you too young for Oz?
A little bit, but I bring this up because there's a new show on Netflix called Unlocked, a jail experiment, and this is a hardcore penitentiary. And they let the prisoners out without guards, and they try and foster a community.
That just took
Dude, that's
a
dangerous.
180. That actually
I only saw the premise. I haven't seen the execution. I'm sure that's gonna go. I don't know how it's gonna go. We'll see. I mean, I believe in humanity, but I also believe in Shanks. So I'm not quite sure.
I mean, you're throwing a lot out. You've been doing a lot. I've been trying to find this video in that time.
Wait, I wonder if in those situations when they're filming in a prison, they're clearly getting consent from the people they're filming, because by law you have to. I wonder if they're also making payments. Because they basically have they're the talent. They're the thing that people are doing in the city.
They should.
I wonder if they have to. They must have to. But then there are laws about people who are locked up earning money.
Right. Very, very little.
You get something, but they're really not supposed to profit. Towards the crimes they're doing.
Right, but you're not profiting from crimes. That profiting from being in prison.
It's like the second time I haven't gotten.
So I think they probably it's probably like prison.
That's
prison.
Michael also watches Prison Housewives.
Dude, I swear, maybe not thousands.
Is that a thing?
Hundreds of hours watching Locked Up. We used to fall asleep to it because my wife loved that show.
No, it's not a real thing, but most of the husbands of the Real Housewives do end up listening to jail.
Yes, I did know this. Yeah.
50%.
It's like it's an insane number. I think every show, every individual show, like New Jersey, etc., somebody goes to jail. Yeah.
The psychology of those people volunteering to get that show fascinates me.
Yeah.
It's dangerous
But
because they're all dating and or married to shady men. Well, most of them, right?
I should let me take back some of what you said, Jai. I don't know. That's
Deon's just like,
it seems like there are like financial crimes being uncovered by virtue of these people being under a spotlight.
Yeah.
And being on show.
Yeah, there was one from the OC who had a whole documentary about her, and I can't think of the name right now.
Oh, Michael will know it.
Yeah, it's the lawyer
He's afraid
guy.
to say that. He's afraid to say the name because he goes to BravoCon.
No, I don't. No. My wife does love. I mean, a lot of wives.
Hey, that's too far. That's where you're like, let me set the record straight.
It's either the Real Housewives and that's her two things.
Okay.
Somebody could remind me too. That's all I'm saying. It'd be a fire show.
Prison Wives. Coming to TLC.
So, has anybody seen? I was too busy not to brag today to look at the market, but Apple. I just checked. Apple's up 3%. Is there news? I mean, that's a big fat candle. 3.5%. Any news? You were on TV today. Any Apple news? There must be. Does it just go up 3.5% for no reason?
You know what? I don't think we talked about it. But the biggest thing we were talking about halfway through the day today was going green after the mini inflation panic of yesterday. It's what we cycle through these panels really fast.
That's crazy. I was up 3%. You didn't talk.
You didn't get it.
3.5. That's a big move for Apple.
3.5. Yeah.
By the way, so the S&P is now flat as of 2 days ago. So everything that happened yesterday
Didn't happen.
That's the second time that happened last year too. After that, like little mini sell-off, and then
this market is just strong.
I don't think we've hit a 3% sell-off all year.
We haven't had feeling like since November.
We technically had to. I did look at
Intraday?
this. No, on a closing
When?
basis, we had 2.04%.
When? Was it just recently?
I can't remember the day that we hit the low, but
I'll never
like
forget
a few
it.
days ago.
I lost
I
everything.
love the
that
fact
day.
check.
I'm sorry, Callie. No,
Real-time
you
fact check.
very well may be right. Well, let's go to the scoreboard.
That was one of the tougher days in my career. The 1.1% Dow Jones decline.
No.
It hasn't even happened.
It hasn't happened?
The streak remains.
I want to double check that, but I can't.
My name is Paul, and that's between y'all.
No, okay, this is what it is. You look at SPY, I was looking at the index.
Pro move.
Yep.
Then I believe you. I said
Yeah.
Michael
sometimes-
looks at the ETF, but you're a professional.
I mean, 90% of people are looking at ETF.
You're looking at
Let's
the
be
index
real.
level.
That's what you can invest in.
That's.
You're right. She's right. She's right. Of course she's right. Of course she's right.
I was, I
Of course
believed in
she's
Callie
right.
all the time.
I'm a basic bitch. I looked at the ETF. Callie nailed it.
No, I think I'm the basic. I think I'm the basic.
No. It's me.
No.
It's me. We clapping? Let's do it.
We're ready.
I still feel naked without a hat.
Mineral field
It is what it is.
depleted.
Franklin and Friends, episode 138.
Today's show is brought to you by Global X. Since 2008, Global X ETFs have been committed to empowering investors with unexplored and intelligent solutions. Global X specializes in ETFs that track emerging trends like the rise of artificial intelligence, as well as strategies aimed to generate high income potential. Visit globalxetfs.com to explore a lineup of more than 90 ETFs, along with insights to help you navigate a dynamic investing landscape.
138. This guys, this is 2 returning champions on one show. I'm super excited. This is the Compound and Friends. My name is Downtown Josh Brown. If you're listening for the first time, the show is about money, investing, the economy, trading, making contributions to Sam Bankman-Fried's commissary.
Yeah.
And it's about life. And man, are we lucky today. 2 returning champions. Dion is here. Dion Rabone is an award-winning journalist writing about markets and the economy. You've seen his work in the Wall Street Journal, CNBC, Reuters, Yahoo Finance, the New York Times, ESPN, and others. Dion, welcome back. So good to have you.
Hey, thank you so
It's
much
been
for
a minute.
having me. It's been a
We
minute.
have some notes from your last appearance.
Yeah, okay.
We can go back through that. All right. You were right. You were right. Callie Cox is here, ladies and gentlemen.
What's up?
Callie's a market strategist who's passionate about teaching everyday investors the power of investing for their wallets and their lives. Most recently, she was U.S. investment analyst at eToro, where she educated 2 million customers about stocks, crypto, option markets through timely reports and strategic initiatives. Callie, welcome back to the show.
What's
I know there's a
up?
lot
So good to
more.
be here.
Your bio is expanding by the day.
I love your intros. I feel bad. I didn't give you guys as good an intro when I had you on the podcast. I feel bad about it.
Hey, let's talk about that. That was a good episode.
It was a good episode.
Very timely. Bank earnings are at the end of this week.
Yeah.
So all right,
Yes,
that was cool.
the whole thing with the show is like we were looking ahead to what was coming. So yeah,
I like
you guys broke it down, dropped a lot of knowledge.
Previews are underrated in financial media. A lot of people do reactions because, of course, like news happens and somebody has to round it up.
Right.
There's not as many previews from my perspective as there are. Now, I understand why. Harder to do a preview because you might have to predict something that doesn't happen.
Right.
So
But you
I
can
like
preview what's coming up and talk
Yes.
about what's happening. I think that there are no, but there aren't.
Well, there's no audience for a preview. Who cares? Just I'll wait
The
and I'll
market
say.
cares.
No, but the audience doesn't care. I don't want it.
That's a bad
here.
take. That's a bad take. Who cares?
Yeah, we're about to pile on you.
Hold on. If you're invested in a stock, let's say, and 2 days before the company reports earnings, you come across an article that's a preview of the earnings.
I'll wait for the earnings.
Really?
Yeah.
You're skipping it?
Yeah, skipping it. Next.
That's rare.
I don't know about that.
If I still hosted a podcast, I would uninvite you to future episodes.
Just laying out things that could happen or other people are watching for. I feel like that has a lot of value.
Yeah, and that was what we did on the podcast. It was like we'd talk about an earnings preview coming up, and then like an economic indicator. So like CPI is this week. Here's what to watch.
Yeah, what's
Here's why
consensus? What's the storyline? Like, what are people expecting?
What is above consensus? Here's what could happen if it's below. That was the whole point of like, and I would use a lot. People like, oh, I didn't even realize like next week is CPI or next week is.
That's a really great point too. Most people aren't keeping a calendar and thinking about it.
There is no everyday investor calendar that's easily accessible.
That's
Like, forget about the context. There's nowhere to find that.
Wait, Yahoo Finance doesn't have a calendar?
Or maybe they do, but
like this is the data coming out this week by day.
No, they'll put together like. And if you can go find that exact article, the exact time.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
But there's not just like a.
So I downloaded a calendar of the Knicks schedule that I synced with Google Mail, and I don't know how to do things like that. It was really easy. Like there was a button like connect this to your Google Calendar. Yes. So now when the games are happening, I can see them on my calendar. This seems like an obvious thing that somebody should create
I
for
agree.
economic data and earnings.
I think the problem is probably there's not a way to monetize it successfully.
Right.
That's why it doesn't.
Put the ads right into the calendar item.
Listen, I don't know. This isn't what I do.
Josh
but I
has
know that
ad
it
ops.
doesn't. Josh, why don't you do it?
We could do
Ritholtz
this.
Wealth Management presents.
We need more. We need more work
So wait,
to do.
so
Listen,
before we get on,
I want
Rob is literally
5%.
taking
I
it
want
a second
5%. Yeah, see, I want 5%. Right?
before we get on the show, Dion, there was news yesterday I saw online that the Wall Street Journal laid off a bunch of their content creators, podcast hosts, YouTube hosts, and unfortunately, you were one of those people.
I was in those people. But not, honestly, it was crazy.
Oh, this is how it happens.
Yeah, this is how it happens. So which is this my camera?
Upgrade
Do I have a
complete.
camera? Yeah, so first thing I want to say is the Wall Street Journal as a staff record label and as a motherfucking crew. And if you want to be down with the Wall Street Journal, you too. And let's talk it. No. I'm joking. Tupac impression. Yeah, shout out my man Tupac.
Aggregators do not write articles.
Listen, joking. First of all, let me actually.
Let's go, Byron.
What I really want to say is like I actually am so glad. Legitimately, shout out to head of audio, let me bring this podcast to the Wall Street. Like, literally, I made a rap the Wall Street.
First ever. Charles Dow was not doing that.
And I dropped some lines. Like, he had some lines. So,
you had a side for it.
I'm so proud of it. So happy about they told me at like 10 a.m. and I just kind of was hanging out at the office. And everybody was like, man, you're so zen. Like, this is not what I expected from. And the reason was I knew I was good. I knew I was fine. And this is one of these things, like, I've been really passionate about.
I thought I would just completely die here.
Trying to tell you. And it's because of, like, I'm a testament to that, right? Like, I knew that I'm fine because I've got my investments. I got 2 houses. I was literally like, which one of my 2 houses?
Yeah.
And
I just didn't even hear an attacking formation.
I have 2 houses because I didn't picking the best guy. Because I got in the market, I stayed in the market, and that's allowed me to be in a position where.
And honestly, if I would have done this a little better, I could have.
Necessary.
Yeah.
Kind of horrible.
But it's really just like I something I care about because of this. So that, you know, it's nice. You can have nice things. Shout out to my $25,000 Rolex watch. but also, what's much more important is just like that security. Yes. And I knew that if the Wall Street Journal wanted to move on, wanted to go in a different direction, that this partnership I can act that way, right? That's why I can.
Yeah,
I brought my full self. You know, when I didn't like something, I let it.
I mean, not quite,
and it was because I just said, yourself. All right, I'm good. I can set. And that, I think, is something we don't talk about enough in finance when we're doing these things. Like, we like to have fun. We like, and I do, but back to like that fundamental, you know, of like, this is why investing, this is why markets matters. It's that security.
It's such a great point, because when we're building financial plans for clients in sub-segments, this is a very real risk that we need to invest and build into the potential outcomes. And then, of course, financial plans will change as life events happen. Exactly. But it's a very clear and present life event for most people.
I think we talk about the why all the time with our clients, but when we're on the microphone, we're talking about the markets, right? And the important stuff, what you're dealing with, it sort of gets brushed under the rug a little bit.
That's crazy.
Yeah, for sure. And it was like,
100%.
In this moment, I was having lunch with somebody, and she was like, yeah, my friend just got laid off, and she's freaking out. She's going crazy.
Well, it's a temporary loss of, like, it's a temporary uncertainty, because you are going to make a change, but you don't know what it is yet.
Right.
So that's everybody, you know, if you sell a company, there's an uncertainty because you're probably going to do something, but you just don't know what it's going to be.
Yeah.
So everyone feels that at different levels, and it's like a loss of security until you realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm about to go on my next adventure. But you know, it's a thing that people have to go through. But I love the way that you're handling it. I love the Tupac. I love the Tupac.
R.I.P. Tupac, man. The greatest rapper of all time.
So, Callie, the last time you were on was January 2023, and the title.
No, that's not true.
No?
I was here in November.
Second fact check.
Sean.
I was here with Malcolm Etheridge.
Okay, but before that, before that,
Yeah.
But the time before that.
So January 2023, the title of the show was "We Just Might Pull This Off."
That looks pretty damn good now.
You know what else? You said estimates show S&P 500 peak to trough earnings decline could be about 6%. It's important to remember that analysts have underestimated corporate America's resilience recently.
And they did yet again. And I don't want to take too much credit here because first of all, I don't make predictions. Second of all, like we're all going to find ourselves on the wrong side of the call.
But not today.
That day is not today.
But I will say, and I went on a rant about this Tuesday night at the Alphaville Pub Quiz. The job market was so strong. When people are making money, they're willing to spend money.
Yeah, it's such a basic thing, but we kind of like forgot about it. Like That's the
70%
most
of the
important
U.S.
thing.
economy is consumer spending.
I wasn't at the pub quiz this year. I've been there, but
I was actually. I
confused.
didn't. I wish
Were
I
you there?
remember
I saw
that.
you out of the corner of my eye,
Okay.
but I was.
But it's
studying
huge
this.
now.
It was really
was,
big.
Was it like 200 people?
It was something like that.
I saw
More.
pictures.
It was crazy.
I was
Also-
never on a winning team for that though.
Ben McKenzie was there. If anybody knows who Ben McKenzie is,
From
he
the
was
OC?
blonde
From
dude
the
from the
OC.
OC. My first teenage crush.
Okay.
I died.
Did you tell him?
Yes, I did. I went up to him after a few drinks and I was like, "Hey, I'm Callie. I've seen the OC 4 times."
Is he Australian?
He definitely gets that a lot. No,
He's not
American.
Australian. No.
Why do I think he's Australian?
Base is under
I don't know.
I don't know.
Oh yeah, he's a big finance guy now because he hates crypto. He hates crypto.
Yep.
How's it
He was
going?
against us.
Yeah, right? How's that going? It's a little tough when Bitcoin's at 70.
Wait, did Joe and Tracy host it?
No, Joe was on my team, by the
Okay.
way, not to brag. But no, it's the
FT, no?
FT, yeah,
Oh, the
Financial
FT
Times.
host,
So it was
yeah.
Robin Wigglesworth.
Yeah. All right, shout for those
How
guys.
How did your team do?
Oh, this is a whole thing. We didn't. So for everybody who's listening, so the pub quiz, you have 2 rounds of trivia where you're writing the trivia in.
And it's all like economic, financial
Economic,
markets.
financial.
These are nerds.
Really
Also,
hard questions.
hardcore
also a little bit of like English nerdery.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's true.
Yes.
Because it's the Financial Times.
Yeah.
But this year, there was a separate kind of like round that happened throughout the quiz where they gave you 9 charts that you had to identify. And then they gave you some like picture puzzles and you had to guess
They
what
gave you
kind of-
unlabeled charts and you had to say what the chart is.
Yeah, yeah.
Karen,
And
let me ask you a favor with the you.
Your warriors have engaged the enemy.
oh, I get it.
What a
You added
what a
some color.
This is a
What a showstopper.
Okay, but I want to be very clear. So, Sam Rowe, Joe Wiesenthal, John Carney, like they've all been a part of the team that's basically run the table of these
Yes.
quizzes. And we had these charts and these like picture puzzles beside us, but we didn't realize we had to do them throughout the rounds. So the second round of trivia finished, and Jeff was like, "Turn in your papers," and we, oh my
Hadn't
God,
even started
we hadn't even started, so we got them all wrong.
because you're in a rush.
Well, we were just
I
like,
call
we
cap on
gotta.
my story. I call cap.
Did
What?
you hear them
I
announce that?
call cap.
Think they were
No,
drink-
they
they
were
were
just they were
drinking too
sitting
much?
there on the table. Like it was
Alright.
very obvious. And then there was a
Our
thing
whole
on your
team.
sheet. There was a thing on the sheet of like, here are the answers for this part of the quiz.
So
We missed the whole thing.
who won biggest nerd on earth? Who was the big winner?
I mean,
you
who on
know?
your team won?
It was
Oh, you guys won?
no, we didn't win. We
Oh.
were 17 by 34.
Oh, you were 19 and you didn't answer it.
You were 19th? Yeah, all right. Well, yeah, listen, you still beat me.
Yeah, I mean, we were doing really well, but it was.
Yeah, I don't remember which
So I was on teams with like they would like not listen to me until it was something about the stock market. That was like my
Yeah.
only value to the conversation.
That was my role on the team.
Right.
Which
so,
is fine.
So they'd be like, "Who was the 3rd Fed president?"
In Minnesota.
No, period. Like from 1927, and I would just sit there quietly, pounding,
Lyndon B. Johnson.
just drinking, and then there'd be like some question about like Apple's market cap, and I would just like physically clear everybody away.
Get out of the
God,
way.
this is my moment. This is my big moment. All right, we had an eclipse this week. What are the best ETFs to buy after an eclipse? Anyone? No. Why were people carrying on about this eclipse this year more than usual? Do you think?
That's a great question.
Do you have that impression?
People traveled for this eclipse.
People went to the Finger Lakes to see an eclipse.
Went to like not touristy places to watch this eclipse. It was crazy.
I was underwhelmed.
I loved it.
The eclipse.
I'm actually with you. I'm with you, Mike. I thought it was cool. I went out there. I had the
No,
glasses.
you know why? Because I was like, this is dumb. And then I told him put on the goggles. Like, oh shit, this is cool.
Yeah,
The
like you
sun
guys
is
are
a really cool star.
because I put no investment. In it.
Same.
One of the
I
reporters
poo-pooed it.
had some glasses, so we went out there. We looked, oh, cool, all right, dope.
All right, I'm gonna tell you a couple things. First is taking kids out of school early because there's an eclipse. They did that with your kids, right? What the hell
Oh,
is
the
going-
schools did.
Well, my wife.
What the hell is
My
going
wife.
on?
Oh,
My wife.
okay.
Why?
Because she didn't want them to be on the bus looking at it.
Like seriously?
Serially.
Okay. I looked directly at the eclipse.
Josh stared.
How are your eyes?
And he didn't blink.
Not only did I not put the
sun
glasses
lost.
on, I put on binoculars. I looked
You
right
did
at it.
binoculars.
By the way, that's like a
right
Chuck
at it.
Norris joke. Chuck Norris stared at the eclipse and the sun
I was
rose.
with people today at lunchtime. This guy's telling me he went to, or somebody he knew went to Vermont to see the eclipse. I'm like, dude, I saw it from a Five Guys parking lot in between ordering and getting my salad. And I was, I was just thoroughly underwhelmed. I don't know. Duncan,
all
you were
I'm
an
saying-
eclipse, are you an eclipse guy?
I actually didn't even have glasses, so.
Did you even know there was?
I didn't have glasses.
I knew
either.
there was. I knew there was. I tried to take some photographs. I didn't get anything good though.
Yeah, oh, you can't take photos.
It's rough.
But no, I had the glass. Maybe it's because you didn't have the glasses. Maybe that's
All
why
right,
you
listen. It's enough with the pub stuff and the Eclipse stuff. People are here for some market stuff. So let's get
Okay,
this.
let me give you some edge on the Eclipse, like for real, for real. So apparently the S&P 500, so S&P 500 stocks, put them all together. The trading volume in S&P 500 stocks was the lowest since Black Friday.
During the actual
So like
eclipse.
volume actually dropped off.
So the algorithms like watching eclipses?
I guess so, or the humans that are still present.
That's noteworthy.
Yeah, yeah. Which is incredible, but it makes sense. If you're stepping away from it.
So people were like, I'm going to take off a little bit.
Well, it also wasn't a crazy day in markets. It was the S&P's eighth smallest intraday range of the year.
Okay.
It was a boring day. No big deal.
Inflation. So we got a hot CPI. I would call it hot. It's hot.
Yeah, I have a bunch to say about this because I didn't get to do my live stream.
Let's go.
Let's go. 3.5% in March. February was 3.2%. We're going the wrong direction.
Right.
And I know
We
you
can't lose
can
any
pull
probes.
things out of it. You can adjust it and blah, blah, blah. But still, we're still printing 3.5% CPIs. It's like in and of itself, the market does not love this.
And the trajectory is up. I
Yes.
have been really surprised that the market has not reacted more strongly. Like we had that day.
The bond market did.
The bond market had, bond market always. But I mean, even that was like 10, 15 basis
But the
points.
2 year had a huge move.
Like it-
but I'm surprised too the stock market
But
did
that's
really.
but even like 15 basis points. If we're throwing out Fed rate hikes,
Mineral
which
field
for the year.
for the year, right?
Yeah.
Which Torsten Slot came on the podcast from Apollo, and back March 17th, he was like, "I think no rate cuts this year," and I was like, "Oh, shit, hold up,
Yeah.
that's a hot take,"
Yeah.
and that was a hot take. But I think I was like, I see, but it is like I don't, the market. Futures. But I really think zero is a legitimate possibility. I think the Fed is trying to get the market to think like, yo, zero could really be the thing.
The stock market doesn't.
The stock market doesn't, and I'm like, why? But why though? It seems like it should, and I'm wondering if it's just because this is another thing Torsten talked about was this AI thing. Maybe that's just stronger than everything, right? This idea that we are refaceting or reformatting the economy around AI, and that's going to provide such a massive tailwind to everything.
So
Nothing else
if
matters.
they don't cut in June and they cut in July, so what if AI is going to do what we think it's going to do? To
No, it's not
earnings?
if they don't cut in June and they cut in July. It's they don't cut in June or July or October or November.
But I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying, but if earnings are growing way faster than expected, that should dominate the no cut.
I mean, that seems to be what it is. But I mean, like, the Fed is everything. And I feel like somehow we've forgotten that.
But maybe they're not.
What did you think when you saw that hot print? Were you like freaked out about it or?
Me, I never get freaked out.
Okay.
I'm very objective.
Good.
But I have
That's
a
a
few
great
things to say. So first of all, Fed's dual mandate is unemployment and inflation. So they don't care about earnings, they don't care about stock prices. I'm very much a Fed truther in that way.
Okay.
Yes, the CPI report was really hot because of supercore inflation. So CPI, inflation, taking rent out, taking energy prices out.
What's in Supercore or what's not in it? Rather?
So what's in? Okay, so what's not in it?
Yeah.
Rent prices, and energy services, basically.
Okay.
Energy services go up and down a lot
So it's
based
inflation,
on the price of oil.
ex-inflation.
It's core services minus housing.
It's the kind of inflation the Fed can control really well. That's why.
What's so funny? Insurance. This is the stuff that really makes people
I
angry.
mean, rent's still going up.
It's the inflation points that really bother me.
Yeah, the thing. So I just
Go
want
ahead.
to, whenever I think about inflation
Lost
too,
all my
like,
freaking
yes, I want to be clear that inflation
disruptors.
is a problem in our lives. Like, yes, the pace of inflation is coming down.
playing quite well.
But you will
Not
probably never
overextending
pay
and stuff.
cheaper prices than what you're paying today. That will never change. The way that the economy heals is that
him to make
wages
a
pick up,
mistake.
which is what we're seeing right now, and suddenly your paycheck stretches a little bit further. But that takes time. So
It's such a great. Like that's a like. You might not like the prices today, but they're the lowest prices you'll ever pay in your life.
Yeah.
You're gonna love these prices in 5 years. Now
5 years are gonna wish.
Well, but I say that to say that I understand. I'm a human.
Maybe I
I
should've
understand
just attacked
the
him when I
struggle
killed
of
him.
inflation, and I don't want to poo-poo it at all. But the way that the Fed looks at it is the super core measure. Powell has
Maybe that
said
was my
that
only- I
every
don't
single
know, I
time
didn't
he's
feel
been
like I was
public.
that far
This
behind.
is how I look at inflation.
Pros,
This is what we
we'll
base
see.
policy on. We can't control gas prices. Like, come on, that's a supply chain. So there's the Fed's view of inflation, and then and then there's also the daily lives. You know, that inflation really sucks, prices really suck, things are so broken.
Yeah, populist. But here's the other thing about the Fed is, and I haven't heard anyone say this, and I was gonna say this, but like, I think we're now talking about.
Well,
that's your game, right?
I think ours is
I don't think so. It's we were at 3-1, then it's 3-2, then it's 3-5. Like, things are clearly moving in one direction. And it's been over expectations the past 4 months. So every time economists have come in and they've kind of been like, okay, it's gonna be all over 3%. Nope, over 3%. Oh, it's gonna be down to around 3%. Nope. Now we're back up to 3.5. And again, gas prices are moving consistently. There's a clear line. You see gas prices, auto insurance, home insurance, rents were expected to start pulling down CPI for a long time.
Medical's another one.
And yeah, medical, like everything. Figure it out. There was,
I mean,
and
usually I
right,
have,
it just
like,
keeps being more things.
I bought a baseball glove, my
but
bad.
That was straight to
Yeah, like, no, but it's generally the trend of all these things is going in one direction. I think there's really serious distortion.
We have very little.
Stock market correction.
Yeah, for sure.
That's
like overnight.
Look at this. So we're
Maybe
looking at
the
a
player
chart. This is from Bloomberg. The U.S. CPI month-over-month annualized efficiency index is slowly progressing rate of CPI components, and there's a line that shows things that are going down, so under zero, so things that are where the price is going down.
Deflating.
Deflating. And that's gone sideways. So there's no more or no less things that are going down. But if you look at the basket of things that are rising over 4% month-over-month, it's
I can always
it's going
recall.
in one
There's
direction.
no reason
That's
not to
interesting.
just.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the that
Keep
chart
chasing.
from 2024 is kind of exactly the oil chart. It's kind of exactly
my
like
gosh,
it's
yeah.
all these
Took them
things. They're
so
just
long
moving in
to-
that
Did
direction.
PPI bail us out
Built all these
today?
starports.
So all this, like
I
as
would've
of
just-
it's Thursday afternoon,
Oh my gosh.
everything kind of reversed positive
Bummer,
today.
dude.
We've repaired a lot of the damage from yesterday. Little bit of small cap bounce, little bit of regional bank bounce. Semiconductors gained back some ground because you got a cooler than expected producer price index, which I know is like less important, but like
Can't
today
beat a
Seems
Darren.
like, though.
seems like good enough.
Yeah, and I want to be clear too. The Fed cares about PCE.
Yes.
CPI
Right.
is the report that everybody
0-3
loses their
against
minds
Tarrant.
about. And yes, you should watch it. It's a big market
Tarrant's
mover
too
type of
good.
report. But the Fed is watching PCE. That's what their target is based on. And there is a difference between PCE and CPI. The baskets are different. The weightings are different. So that's the other thing too.
But-
I got to see the PCE report.
But core PC has been right around 3% too, and if that starts again, that's been pretty consistently just sort of holding.
It's the
around
last
this
mile.
3%.
That's tough.
Yeah, that was the thinking before, but again, now CPI is clearly going up. If PCE starts picking up, and I think this PCE report is going to be really big because I think
When
at
is
that
that?
point,
Oh, I forgot. We don't have a calendar.
End of the month.
I think it's
Is
the
it end of the month?
28th, 29th.
Okay.
I
I agree with you.
But
That's
yeah, I think
that's gonna be
that
that's gonna
could
be a big deal.
Right. If that comes in hot and over 3
Yeah.
on the core side, like that is
What's the big difference between CPI and PCE? The shelter component is very
Scrubbles,
different
you
from
still
one to
here?
the other.
Yeah, I think the shelter weight is more for PCE.
Yeah.
Maybe. Don't quote me
no,
on
no,
that.
shelter is less
Less?
for PC. Yeah, which is why it's been
Not to do
lower.
another pub quiz. Just
I know.
It's no, so I know
did
it's
this on
Because a third is CPI and it's less of PC.
What's the best
Yeah.
theory? What's the best theory you guys have for why? All right, let's hope you're wrong that we're about to put rate hikes back on the table. Let's
I think some
let's
Fed
assume it's
presidents
premature. Although I agree, it's like if that were to happen, it would have a huge impact. But let's hope that doesn't happen. But what's your best theory for why, even if it does happen, rate hikes really haven't done anything to the consumer, anything noticeable in the aggregate?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'd love to hear like either your own idea or the best idea you've heard as to why that's the case.
Well, our wallets
36%
are less and
against
less
Tarrant.
sensitive to
What's
rates
going
because
on?
I mean, I know not everybody owns a house, but a
We
lot
have
of
to
people have
generalize
fixed
in this,
mortgages under
conversation. Yeah.
Right. So CoreLogic data, I think it says 70 or 80% of people have fixed mortgage rates under 4%.
Right.
And I mean, that was a product of the low
Oh,
rate
not
environment
queuing.
that we've been through. I'm not saying it's a bad
Thought I
thing,
pushed Q
but the
again.
Fed has fewer and fewer levers to pull to control the consumer.
Yeah.
And again, also not saying that rates are not affecting the consumer. They certainly are. But, we're just less sensitive to rates than ever. And that's true for corporate America too, to be fair.
What do you think?
For sure. This is a question I've been thinking about for a long time, and I haven't found a good answer. I do think, I think, Mike, you talked about this on my podcast or my former podcast, but there is this thing where people do keep spending. And I've seen data that shows like the bottom 2 quartiles of income have had negative savings like the past 6 quarters. So literally they're spending more than they make.
Yeah.
And you're seeing across the board like decreases. You're seeing increases in things like delinquencies, but not the you're 90 days behind. Those things have still stayed put, and so there really just hasn't been this reaction that you'd think there would be, especially considering how low consumer confidence is, especially considering gas prices are going up, all that. And I don't know. It is kind of crazy. What Callie points out about the the housing part of it, because that's a lot of people's biggest expense. That's been mostly fixed, but it really has just blown my mind that you have not seen people.
The world has changed. The world has changed, and people hate to hear that this time it's different. But I think, I don't know if it was you or Ben, but somebody wrote a blog post about experts of a
earlier version of the world.
Experts on an earlier version of the world. There are people who could tell you chapter and verse. Here's what happens the last 6 times the Fed raised rates.
Yeah.
Right.
Here's what it did to stock prices, bond prices. Here's how long it took for the economy to bottom, employment, mortgages. None of that stuff seemed to have applied this time, and the world has changed.
And that also, I think, that gets to my thought about a Fed rate hike.
Okay.
Because consumers are still spending. Jobs, that's the other thing, the jobs market still hot, 330K last month. So all those things are happening in a world with 5.5% interest rates. What's 5.75?
Yeah, the Fed has never been cutting interest rates with college employed unemployment is 1% right now.
Yeah, but
historically,
okay, that's
the Fed
a good
has
thing.
not
Let's
cut,
be clear. We want a
right,
strong
but
job
historically,
market.
the Fed has not cut interest rates into an environment like that.
Also, PMIs. Now that PMIs are back positive, the Fed doesn't cut rates when
that's a
PMIs
good point,
are
too.
strengthening, right?
Yeah.
All these things are happening.
Did you read this thing from Matt Klein at the Overshoot, Mike?
I did not.
Okay. So he was
Takes
trying to
forever to
answer
find
this
a game
question. Why
sometimes.
have rate hikes not done anything? And I thought he did a really good piece. And he's talking about consumer behavior around rates. A good swath of Americans are benefiting from higher rates.
Yeah.
So this is something that I've talked about just in terms of how much money their cash is earning and how that makes them feel.
Shout out
80%
5% money market accounts.
So 80% of people with a fixed mortgage rate under 4%, that's great. Investors have more flexibility than ever to chase higher income. Okay, this is important. It used to be that you didn't move money from one bank to another really easily.
Yep.
Like it was not a thing. There's no internet in prior rate hike cycles. Like literally, there was not internet banking in 2004.
There's no blockchain.
2005. No, seriously though, there's no fintech.
Yeah.
Like if you were unhappy with the rate that your bank was paying you in 2005, it was like, all right, well that sucks. I don't want to fill out paperwork.
You have to literally drive around.
So okay,
The bar's lower.
so the flexibility I think is underrated, and people are chasing these rates. We know.
I agree.
Yeah.
I
I'm a rate
agree.
chaser.
And the awareness around rates is higher than ever. Everybody well, not everybody, but it's now a thing to talk about the high rate on on why am I blanking? The series savings, whatever.
Oh, iBonds?
I am yes, iBonds.
iBonds.
I'm having a brain.
That was to this day that was the highest most clicks I've gotten on an article.
But everybody talked about it. Yeah. 9% yield on iBonds. I had friends coming to me asking me if I should set up an
Should they buy
LLC to
iBonds?
buy more iBonds. And I was
They
like,
definitely heard about iBonds on TikTok.
yeah, but
100%.
it's the rate sensitivity there,
Yes.
or the rate awareness, because yes, our wallets are very
What are we
sensitive.
gonna do with car insurance? What do we do about car insurance?
Can we show the video? Like, can we just get the? Because I
Oh,
want to.
Dan
I feel like this is a
really
great
wants it.
segue.
Where-
I really
where is
want to
it?
show
Where is
this.
it? How do we see
I
this?
just sent it to the email thread.
Oh, okay.
In
Well,
there somewhere.
Josh, yeah, pull it up, Josh.
look that up.
Is John in the email thread? Because I can't pull it up.
Because this is, I sent it to everyone on the internet, so you should have got it. The last email from. All right, but I can fill.
Yeah, just do it live.
Find this.
Just do it live.
Let's do it live.
There's a beat.
I have it.
There's
I
a
have
whole
it.
thing.
Yeah, this Unc Sam, man. I hear y'all out here, y'all buying crypto, y'all buying meme stocks again like Tupperware, y'all buying JGB, listening to the ECB.
Beard is
And y'all
crazy.
ain't buying AI stocks, you don't know nothing about AI. That's why you're losing money. That's why your
those real
portfolio
hundreds?
stay in the red.
Oh, of course.
Y'all need to learn about these bonds. Treasury bonds, my bonds. Paying over 5%, my bonds. Money from the government, my bonds. What you know about real yield, my bonds. Treasuries,
I can't believe they let you do this.
I can't either.
Real, all the mother stakes earning treasury.
We are-
Real yields highest since the 2000s.
We are getting word
get the
from
video.
Jason Zweig. He is leaving the Wall Street Journal now. he wasn't aware that this happened, and
Can I tell you, Swag loved it? Swag is my guy. Swag is my guy. I love Swag.
all right. So, what did you want to tell us besides your mad skills,
Besides showcasing
undeniable skills?
No, but that's the other
Could be
part
you
of it,
versus
right?
Kendrick next. Are you ready?
Listen, we're
ready for that
beefing.
smoke?
Yeah, I'm ready for the smoke. I got a verse for him. It's gonna end his career.
Engage the enemy.
But no, the point I was trying to make was, I actually think it's like not enough people are aware. So this Santander survey just came out, and it said, I think it was 75% of people said they would switch if they thought it took under 10 minutes, but they're not.
Switch for what? A higher yield on
rate,
cash.
right? And I think there was a bank rate survey. I wish I could remember the numbers, but it's something like,
Dude, what is this guy doing?
50% of people are still getting less than 3%. And actually the amount of money, like interest-bearing deposits in the big 5 banks, like JPM,
Getting zero, there's trillions.
is getting, is more. It's increased over the last
Your
year.
warriors have engaged
Right,
the
so
enemy.
there's more people still getting zero for their savings in this era of like 5%.
Because I think over 15 years, people have become conditioned to feel like it's not worth it. Now it's worth it.
It's absolutely
But there's
worth it.
so much inertia in life. Like things. Think about it. People
It's
paying
hard,
gym
yeah.
memberships that don't show up. Think about
Your
like
warriors have
it's just a
engaged
lot of
the
inertia.
enemy.
So this is another form of that.
It is, but I think it's easier now than it's ever been, and that's
Agree.
why I wanted to do that video, was to just like make something people
Did people say that like, oh, I wasn't gonna move my money, but then
But then I saw this rap
There-
video.
so-
then I saw Uncle
literally-
Sam in the trap.
Literally, the background on my Twitter post is this comment on that video that goes, "Yo, this song slaps. I'm gonna buy some bonds."
There we go. I want to give Neil Dutta the final word.
You saved one
Wait,
guy.
can I say one
Please,
thing
go
before
ahead.
you go?
Go ahead.
So I think both can be true. I think that investors can be more aware of the 5% rates than ever, but there's also a subset that has no idea, doesn't care, just wants to say that inertia. Talk about. But so we did a survey on this
Research
forum,
complete.
and this blew my mind. We basically asked people, are you piling up cash? Do you own more cash now than you did 3 months ago?
Your
Why are you
warriors
piling
have
up
engaged
cash?
the
And
enemy.
kind of slice the demographics out of it. Oh, and what would force you to take cash out and put it somewhere else? And younger investors by far said that I'm piling up cash, I'm doing it for free, and I would love to reinvest it one day when I feel better. But it blew my mind. Because younger investors, too, in the survey were more optimistic about the economy, more optimistic about their investments, more optimistic about their job prospects.
That's good though.
But
I mean,
they're
that's
great.
But you're saying they're staying in cash rather than investing that in the market.
That's a weird dichotomy.
That's not great, but they are being opportunistic around these 5% rates because it's 5% rate.
Did they buy that 2% dip?
Yeah. The boomers are not gonna panic enough to give them that opportunity that they all think they're gonna get.
Yeah.
It's startling to watch. The boomers just will not panic sell their stocks anymore. It's almost as if 40 years of conditioning have taught them not to do that, and they refuse.
That's the other thing about this.
It's
right?
interesting.
I think again, even if there are, we start to hear about Fed rate hikes, I don't know that that's even on this route, because there just is so much.
it will.
The animal
It will.
spirits,
It
the
will.
animal
For a
spirits.
hot
are
4
so
hours.
good. For a hot 4 hours, right?
No, it won't kill us, Riley. All right, Neil Dutta. Here's what he said when inflation came out. He said, yes, actual inflation was a setback today, but it is important to go to first principles. Wage growth is cooling and returning to something resembling normal. The Atlantis Fed median wage tracker eased to 4.7% in March, the weakest since December 2021. If wage growth is cooling and price inflation is rising, We ought to be less concerned about runaway inflation and somewhat more concerned that consumers begin making trade-offs, cutting back on spending. That, in turn, will work.
Please say that. That is like telling me you never know. We're still on track to see
This is the shit.
I used to, I showed that chart
I'm
all the
pointing,
time.
I'm pointing to the wage growth.
Explain the chart,
So
Michael.
wage growth peaked in 2000, what is it, 21?
21.
And it's heading the right direction, which is lower, and this ultimately is what drives. This is the sticky part. And there's a lot of other sticky parts. So I'm not hand waving anything, but if we zoom out, this is the thing.
And
Yeah,
it's,
this
and
is
it's
the
still
chart.
falling.
Yeah.
I agree. Going back to the Fed cares about unemployment, the job market, and inflation. They're trying to balance the seesaw here. This is a chart that shows us that they're correctly balancing the seesaw. And I agree, like we want to get a 7% raise over a 4% raise, come on. But also, wages, when they're growing that lot, they become a risk to the economy.
By the way, no, look when the peak of wage growth was. Were people happy then? No, they were miserable.
And they're still
They were
miserable.
talking about supply chains and eggs.
Stagflation.
Let's not act like we weren't
Stagflation
here.
was the hot button.
3 years ago, people were pissed.
Yeah, I'm not advocating for like lower raises here. I'm just saying we need to get this back in balance.
Yeah, because when that was happening, inflation was at like 9.
Exactly.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
And you don't want inflation over wage
I think
growth.
people want fast wage growth, just not for anyone other than themselves.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right.
Yes,
so
that's
this is I want to go back to auto insurance because this really grinds my gears. Well, I'm paying for multiple people in my home now. I don't even understand what the hell this is based on. Why?
I think it's the we can principle.
But why would this go up 20% in a year? What the f is that?
Because we can.
Room to run.
But are there
I see no resistance.
Are there 20% more fatalities on the road?
I heard a good
a
theory
year?
around this. So, and this is not from me. I read it from a much smarter economist,
You
but
heard it from the Geico lizard.
from the Geico lizard.
All
Shout
right.
out. I read a really good take on this around the number of cars that have been ruined by natural disasters. And I don't know if this
really?
is
Climate
real or
change.
true, but apparently that impacts. Of course, it impacts on insurance. It's had like a bigger impact recently. But I was like,
What a crock
okay.
of shit.
No,
They're
it's not a
blaming
crock.
natural disasters.
No, it's not
It's
definitely a
interesting.
crock of shit. Because property casualty rates are also up through the roof
Yeah.
year over year, and there's a huge climate impetus behind that.
I think it's one reason.
It's not like there's earthquakes in New York.
No,
I want. There you go.
the reinsurers set the rates
Yeah.
for property casualty
yeah.
that the insurers then are forced to pay, who then turn around and hit us with it. And
Are their margins
climate-
not? Are their margins not increasing?
Climate is disastrous for reinsurance, and therefore the premiums have to go
How
up.
much are they taking to the bottom line?
Who?
Not
It
nuts.
depends.
Not nuts.
Auto insurance? I don't think they make that much money.
You don't think their margins are increasing with this rise? Of course they are. Come on.
They will temporarily, and then they'll compete each other to death on. I mean,
In a free market, yes.
okay, there are insurance companies pulling out of states. State Farm denied coverage to 72,000 customers in California, not auto, property casualty, but for the same reason.
Yeah.
There are uneconomical insurance policies out there. I'm not crying for insurance companies, believe me.
Base
Someone,
is
I'm
under
saying the
attack.
opposite. But I am making the point because I don't think they're having that much fun. Just by virtue of being able to raise rates is not necessarily great for them.
No, but I do think that a little bit of this is on the margin.
Oh no, a lot of it.
And yeah, and I don't know that. I think it gets back to CPI is right around 1%.
So you think a lot? So what percentage of a 22% rise in auto insurance year over year is free inflation?
That's a great question.
10%?
19. No, I'm kidding.
30%?
So I
We're
remember.
talking percents
I
of
remember
percents.
like 2 years
I know.
ago. I remember 2 years ago in Shasta Corporate America. One of the home builders was asked, "What are they doing to prices now that lumber's come way down?" He said, "Oh, we're taking it apart. We're taking it to the bottom line."
Yeah.
Prices don't come down.
I bet the stock price.
But this,
Ever. No, it's good for investors,
John.
but it sucks for policyholders, which is all of us.
Impact of auto insurance on U.S. CPI year over year percentage.
Wild.
So explain this chart.
So what we're looking at is the auto insurance contribution, and it started at a very low rate, and now it's 56 basis points. It's a lot. It's 56 out of the 347. It's a lot.
And one of the stories I did last year was about consumers. It's these middle class families, right? Because it's people living in the suburbs who have 2 cars
And
right?
kids,
they drive
maybe.
and kids, right? But it's so what is that? It's gas, it's auto insurance, it's all these things that are affecting largely suburban, largely middle class people. Like, and that's who's hitting it the most. So actually, in this story, I showed how the middle class is actually getting hit the most by this rise.
And that was an opera.
I'm sorry. In 2015, auto insurance was a negligible percentage of CPI. Right now, it's 56 basis points out of 3.5%. So if you were to pull this auto insurance contribution out of this number, are we at 2.5? Are we at 3% inflation?
Well, the frustrating thing I was talking about super core inflation. But it makes you think, and like Jay Powell is much smarter than me. But I mean,
auto insurance is not in autos. It's not in durable goods. It's in services.
Exactly. Yeah. So there are these like it's not just like nothing's ever this in a weird way.
Your warriors have engaged the enemy.
But it sounds like an industry system.
Right, I don't know how you
Let's keep moving. Manufacturing is back.
Woo, baby!
You mentioned ISM manufacturing activity is growing for the first time in 2 years.
I would say sort of manufacturing industry has been negative, I want to say 18 the last 19 months. Last month, I want to say 44, which is decidedly below.
They lying?
So I just think that's a thing to watch. This is good news what happened in manufacturing last month, and it's great that manufacturing is back. But that Chicago PMI number for folks getting excited about this PMI thing that manufacturing is back is worrisome. I think.
This is a survey.
It's a regional story, and that's not great.
ISM is a survey.
And that's the
ISM's a
heartland.
survey.
So Chicago, they might be upset about other shit.
It's the Chicago PMI. So
That's
it's the Midwest basically. How's
Yeah.
the Midwest doing? And like not good.
Yeah, well, the Cubs aren't doing.
But what we keep learning is
Bears.
that people feel
Yeah.
the feels are worse than the facts. So is that distorting these surveys a little bit?
You can, and that's why some folks don't like things like PMI and these sort of soft data surveys. But 18 out of 19 months is good. And NFIB small business optimism has been negative, or not negative, but has been below its historical average from the but there are all these things that are showing like there's just a lot of stress. And yes, this number going back positive is solid and it's a thing to look into, but there is just a lot of angst. There's a lot of angst, but also a lot of like
noisy too. This could go positive and then negative the next month.
and that's what I'm saying.
It doesn't trend.
Chicago PMI is negative 18 out of 19 months.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah, so I think if you're an investor and you're looking at sectors,
Upgrade complete.
this is incredibly important. Like what Josh said, like this it is trending. So like 50, of course, is the line where between manufacturing is getting better and manufacturing is getting worse. And for the longest time, getting worse, but less and less worse over the past few months, if that makes any sense. It's the direction, right? So now manufacturers feel better. The suppliers are saying, oh, okay, like I feel great. We expect, more orders to come in the pipeline. And that pushed the soft survey
Your
above
warriors
50.
have
And I think
engaged
we
the
should consider
enemy.
that when cyclicals have been just absolutely trounced. And the talk is all about
Warriors have engaged the enemy.
big tech is leading the market and nothing else is. This to me speaks about a rotation, which we've seen over the past few weeks.
Josh, but that's not true. What's the custodial?
Mike's trying to fact check.
No.
Real-time fact
What's
check.
the company that manufactures gear? Like we were saying about like custodial
Upgrade
gear.
complete.
Oh, CTAS.
Is that it?
Cintas. Yeah.
Stock's on fire.
Yeah.
Oh, the stocks are killing.
This
So
is the
I
economy.
mean the costume company.
Costume company.
Yeah, they
Not
make
costume,
they make
outfits.
costumes for workers. ADP.
Okay.
is another one.
Does that look like anything other than holy cow? That's great news.
No. So, okay, so we had
Look at that chart.
We had the CEO of Ferguson on this episode of the podcast that's never going to
Turd
air.
Ferguson?
No, Mike, not Turd Ferguson. But we had the CEO on this episode that's never going to air, so I think I can talk about it. And he's like, yeah, you know, our stock is on fire. They're up 70% over the past year. I think like
What is Ferguson?
Ferguson is like piping. It's all the stuff for basically home remodels, construction, all that stuff.
All those stocks are amazing.
Yeah, look, incredible. So I was like, but so what he said is like, this big manufacturing resource to and actually, it was on the podcast, but I interviewed Joe Biden. You know, Inflation Reduction Act, CHIPS Act, all those things put a bunch of money out into the manufacturing sector that's supposed to be.
It takes time because it multiplies.
That's
The
exactly.
there has to be a velocity of that money. You have to feel it in the economy, and eventually you will.
And so what
It's never really.
yeah. But what the CEO was saying was like, look, there's all these jobs out there. We right now are on top. But look at this, we've got to and so we can't really get a lot of this stuff going because finance or journalism. But like, you know, the people aren't, that last one's a bad decision. But my point is just that people kind of stopped going to trade school, stopped doing it, and so there's just not.
Talk to Jason Steele about that. I was asking him, like, what are the odds that the United States will really be able to restart semiconductor manufacturing in Arizona? And he was very pessimistic because he said it's not that easy. We don't have a clean room for Intel.
Right.
And nor do we have the people that have that experience because we stopped doing it 25 years ago.
Exactly.
We sent that to the Far East. So now you want a standing start. It's really hard.
And that's the thing that there hasn't been that investment of
Yeah.
like trying to get kids excited about going into manufacturing. Like my one of my little cousins just graduated from high school, and I was like, "Have you thought of?"
Read this guy. Peace out, y'all. Have a good day.